Hi there, and welcome to a project video where you'll build and deploy a custom blog app with a content management system. We'll implement all of the features that you can imagine on an advanced blog platform. I'm talking featured and recent posts, tags and categories, articles with images, full markdown content, author information, previous and next post. You name it, you'll build it in this video. You'll also learn how to implement moderated user comments. Most importantly, you or your clients will be able to create all the content that you can see right here from a dedicated content management system. This CMS blog is the best blog application that you can currently find on YouTube and on the entire internet. In this one video, you'll learn advanced React and Next.js best practices. We'll use Next.js pre-rendering with static generation. You'll also learn how to create a modern user interface using Tailwind CSS completely from scratch. Then, we're moving to the real deal. You'll learn GraphQL and GraphCMS. GraphQL is a querying language, and we'll cover creating schemas, models, and finally retrieving data using GraphQL queries. GraphCMS, on the other hand, is the best GraphQL content management system out there, and in this video, you'll learn how to use it to its fullest potential. I initially planned on putting this as a paid course, but I later decided to release it completely for free for you guys here on YouTube. So, to support this video, leave a like, comment, and subscribe. It shouldn't take more than a few seconds, and I really appreciate it. Keep watching and I'll teach you how you can build this amazing custom CMS blog in just one video completely for free. In the end, we'll also deploy the app so that you can share it with your friends, put it on your portfolio, and get a job. With that said, let's dive straight into the code. Before we dive into the code, please allow me to give you a quick demo of the entire application and the functionalities that you're going to build throughout this video. This is the website we'll be building. You can create your own completely custom blog from scratch. In this case, I named it GraphCMS after the platform we're going to be using, and let's check it out. As you can see, on the top, we have our navigation bar where we can switch to different categories. Also, just below the navigation bar, we have a list of featured posts. We can browse through them and find the ones that we like. Below that, we have our articles list on the left side and then recent posts and categories on the right side. We can scroll through the articles, as you can see. All of the articles have a title, author, the date of publishing, some short description, an image, and then the continue reading button. As you can see, as I scroll, we can see the recent posts and categories remain in the view. So let's go ahead and read more about the best NPM packages. Did you see how quickly that opened up a new page? That's the beauty of Next.js and GraphCMS. We have our great post image, and just below that, we have our article. This article has just the text, but in here you can embed images, videos, and whatever you like. On the right side, we no longer have recent posts, but rather related posts. And then if we scroll down, we can see the author information, as well as the previous and next article in our list. Finally, we can leave a comment. As you can see right here, you can write your own comment, include your name and email, and then that comment is going to appear here. These comments are not that meaningful, but of course your real users are going to write more meaningful comments. With that said, let's try to go to our next article right here, and again, it loaded up extremely quickly. We can now go to a specific category, like web development, and we're gonna get only the articles for that specific category. We can go to continue reading, and let's try leaving a comment. I'm going to say test in this case. The name is going to be JSM and email is going to be jsm@gmail.com just for testing purposes. Finally, we're going to implement local storage to save the name and the email in the browser for the next time when we comment. Let's post a comment. And as you can see, comment submitted for review. That means that the comment is not going to be published immediately. It's left for review to the creator of this post. And we can allow or disallow that comment from our GraphCMS. We're gonna see that later on. That was the short introduction of the project that we'll be building. I hope you like it, and I'm really excited to teach you how to use all of these technologies. Now, before we go ahead and set up our GraphCMS schema, let's quickly discuss the technologies we'll be using. We'll be using GraphQL. GraphQL is nothing more than a querying language for our APIs. It's an alternative to the classic REST APIs. And I know you might be thinking, why do we need an alternative? And hopefully, throughout this video, you're gonna learn to appreciate all of the new things that GraphQL offers. As you can see, we can ask for exactly what we need. We don't need to get all the data from a specific API endpoint, we get only the information that we need. That's going to make it lightweight and so much faster than the usual REST API. On top of that, we'll be using GraphCMS. GraphCMS is going to allow us to work with GraphQL so much more easily, and it's going to allow us to create, enrich, unify, and deliver all of our content across all the different platforms. Essentially, GraphCMS supercharges the use of GraphQL. In just a minute, we'll already start with creating our first schema inside of GraphCMS. And the final technology on our list is called Tailwind CSS. Tailwind has been growing incredibly well in popularity in the recent few months. It's a utility-first CSS framework. You don't use predefined components. You just use custom utility classes that allow you to create a completely custom design extremely quickly and easily. With that said, before we begin, I just simply want to point your attention to the project GraphQL blog GitHub repository. The link is going to be down in the description. If you encounter an error or get stuck throughout this video, definitely make sure to visit this repository, compare the code, and see if you might have some typos. This usually resolves most of the issues. Again, the link is going to be down in the description, and while you're here, definitely make sure to leave a star. I absolutely appreciate that. Now that you completely understand what we'll be building and which technologies are we going to use to build it with, let's go ahead and get started. Before we create our project folder and start creating the code for our application, there's one thing we have to do before, and that's create a GraphCMS schema. If we do this at the start, that's going to save us so much time later on and make everything so much easier. So to visit this page, click the link down in the description and click Get Started. That should redirect you to the login form. In this case, I'm going to log in, and that's going to be with Google. Once you log in, you should be able to see a site that looks like this. In here, you can create a new blank project or start from a schema. Of course, when you decide to use GraphCMS for your next project, you can go ahead and choose a blog, commerce, marketing website, or anything else. In this case, I want to teach you how to do everything from scratch, so we're going to choose a blank project. We can give it a project name. In this case, I'm going to name it GraphCMS. Now we can choose a project name. I'm just going to do JSM_blog. And project description is going to be a JavaScript mastery blog. And finally, we can create a project. Then we can choose the region. In this case, I'm going to go with Europe, but you can choose whichever one is closest to you. And finally, let's create a project. You'll then be redirected to the pricing page. Feel free to look at the different pricing plans, but of course, in our case, we're going to choose the free version. So let's go ahead and click Select Plan. And in here, you can choose to invite your team members. In this case, I'm just gonna click Invite Later. And there we go. We are inside of our dashboard. In here, you have your quick start guide. The first thing we have to do is set up our schema. At the bottom right, you'll see a video that's gonna teach you how to do everything, but you're watching this video already, so we don't need that right now. And the first thing we have to do is create a model. The first thing we have to do to create a model is to add a display name. In this case, that's going to be author, because we need to have models for a few different things. If you think in terms of our blog application, we need to have a model for the author object, also for the categories, for the comments themselves, and finally for the entire post. That's going to be 4 different models in total. So the first one is going to be author. Now that we have our model, we have to add our fields to it. And it's as simple as clicking different fields we want to add. So let's click single line text. In here, we can choose a display name, and the name is going to be just name because our author has to have a name. We can use this as a title field, and we can go under validations and make this field required. Let's click create, and our model or our schema is instantly going to get this field. Let's go ahead and add a few more. Our author also has to have the image. So let's find the image right here. And that's going to be asset picker. The display name is going to be photo. And let's say that it's not required, so we can simply click create. The third thing we're going to have is going to be not a single line text, but a multi-line text. And this is going to be a description, or we can call it a bio. Again, not required, so we can simply click create. And that's going to be it for our author. Let's add a new model, and the name of our second model is going to be a category. Our category is also going to have a name, so let's add it right here. And that's also going to be required. And we can also use it as a title field and make it required. And it also has to be unique. So let's create it. There we go. Just by checking a few checkboxes, we have our unique and required name. Then we're going to have a slug. A slug is basically a URL that we have to go to visit that specific category. So the name is going to be slug. And if we go to validation, we're going to make it required. And also it's unique by default. Let's click create. Great. And these are the only 2 fields that we need for our category. Now let's add some more for our comment. So let's create a new model called comment. Fields for our comment are going to be pretty simple. A single line text called name. And we're going to make that required right here. We're going to need one more single line text, which is going to be the email. We need to have an email connected to each comment. So again, make it required. And the third thing that we need is going to be a multi-line text, which is going to be called a comment itself. So this is what the people are going to type to add it to a specific post. And this is going to be required. And now we need to create our main model. If you think about it, the main model is going to be the post itself. It needs to have connections to different things, like to a specific author. It needs to have a date, a title, a featured image, and also the content itself. So let's add one and final model called post. Our post is also going to have a single line text, which is going to be called a title. Our title is going to be used as a title field, and it's going to be required. Our post also needs to have a slug, a URL-friendly identifier. And in here, we can simply add a display name of slug, and validation is going to be required. Let me make this just a bit bigger for you. There we go. The third thing on our list is going to be the excerpt. So let's go ahead and add multi-line text, and we can call it excerpt. Our excerpt is simply going to be a multi-line text, and we just need to make it required. Finally, we have to add the content itself, and that's not going to be simply markdown or multi-line text. It's going to be rich text, text editor with formatting. So we can call this our content. Our content is going to enable embeds, and it's going to be set to required. Finally, we need to have just a few more things. We're going to have an image. So that's going to be an asset picker, and that's going to be featured image. And again, it's going to be required. Then we're going to add a Boolean value. So let's see if we can find a Boolean. There we go. Each post is going to have a Boolean, and the name of that Boolean is going to be featured post. Is this post featured or is it not? And that's going to be required. Finally, each one of our posts has to be connected to all other models that we have. We can make connections or relations in GraphCMS using the relation fields. More specifically, a reference. Let's add our first reference, and we can do that by defining a relationship where we're going to set the author to be our first reference. In this case, we can choose a two-way reference and allow multiple posts per author. Let's click continue, continue, and create. And there we go. Our reference has been created. Let's add one more for categories because each post has to be connected to one or more categories. So let's click reference. That's going to be allow only one model to be referenced, and we want to reference the category. That's going to be a two-way reference, and we want to allow multiple categories per post and also multiple posts per category. Let's click continue, continue, and create. There we go. That should be it for all of the fields on all of our models. Now, let me show you what you can do in GraphCMS dashboard. This was the schema editor, but the real magic happens once you go to the content. Now in here, you can create all of the different users, posts, or comments. As you can see, first we need a new author. So in this case, I'm going to say JSM, and we're going to add a new photo. I simply uploaded the JavaScript Mastery logo, and there we go. Now let's click Save and Publish. Again, Save and Publish. And we have a new author with a name JSM. We have a photo, and let's add a bio. JSM helps aspiring developers reach new heights. Something like that should do. And we are ready to save and publish this author. Now, let's create a category as well. But you might be wondering, why are we doing this right now? And the reason is, once we start coding this out, we'll need some data to fetch. So we need to have at least one author, one category, and one post. We can worry about the comments later on. So let's quickly add a category. And as you can see, right now you have only the fields that we specified when we were creating a schema. So our category is going to be something like web development, and the slug is going to be something like web dev. Right now, we don't have to add any posts, so we're just going to save and publish. And there we go. Our web development category has been created. If something doesn't go right on the first try, just try to create it one more time and again click Save and Publish. Now let's add our post. That's the main piece of data that we have. So let's create a new item and let's copy the post from our current blog. So this is going to be React testing. Then we need to have a slug. In this case, a slug is React-testing. The excerpt is the thing that we see before we click on that post. So just this thing, which is currently just some placeholder lorem ipsum content. And then finally, if we go into it, we can copy the rest. There we go. Again, in here, we don't have any images, but you can add anything you want. You can make the text bold. You can also make it italic, add block codes, links, code, images, anything that you want. Then we can add a featured image. So let's go ahead and create and add a new featured image that we're going to upload. In this case, I'm going to simply copy the image address and just go ahead here and paste it. You can find any image that you already have on your PC or just find one on the web. And there we go. We can click upload and in a matter of seconds, our asset is saved and published. Finally, we need to choose whether this is a featured post or not, and we need to add a new author. As you can see, we already have the JavaScript mastery here. And finally, we need to add a category that this post belongs to. In this case, that's going to be web development. Save and publish. And that's it. Now we have one author, one category, and one post. We are ready to code the entire application out, and then we'll be able to add many more posts, authors, or categories using this great content management platform. Finally, let's close our browser and open up our desktop and then Visual Studio Code. As always, we're going to start by creating a new empty folder on our desktop. Let's name it something like CMS_blog. Finally, you can open up an empty Visual Studio Code editor or any editor of your choice, and then simply drag and drop this folder into it. Great. Now we can go to View and then Terminal. We can start off by initializing a new Next.js application by running npx create-next-app and then -e and finally with-tailwind CSS and then just / to create it in the current repository. As soon as you do that, you'll say that we first need to install the following packages, which is the create next app. Finally, just press Y and then enter. This is going to initialize a new Next.js application in a couple of minutes. So I'm going to pause the recording right now and I'll be right back. And there we go. Our new Next.js application, including Tailwind, has been initialized. Before we actually go ahead and run it, we can first install the necessary dependencies. We can do that by running npm install, and we're going to need GraphQL. We're going to also need GraphQL -request. We'll also need HTML-React-parser, also the moment library for date and time, and we're going to need React-multi-carousel, and finally Sass, because for one file we're going to use Sass to style different things. And that's going to be it. We can simply press enter. And finally, we can run our application by running npm run dev. It's no longer just npm start as in React. It's just a bit different with Next.js. But let's go ahead and check it out. And if you open up your browser on localhost 3000, you should be able to see our website. Great. In here, we have some demo code like the title and a few links to visit the documentation and to learn more about Next.js. But we're going to start completely from scratch. So we can now close this terminal and we can first explore what we have here. The folders that we'll be working with are the pages folder. This is, let's say, the most important folder in Next.js. In here, we have our index.js, which is the starting point of every Next.js application. Then we have the _app.js. Let's call this the second most important component here. And finally, we have the API. With Next.js, you can create entire APIs without ever needing the backend. So that's a great thing about it. Then we have the public folder, which we're going to use for deployment and publishing. And we're going to create a few more folders like components, contexts, and sections. But for now, let's start by clearing up our index.js. I'm going to zoom this out just a bit so we can see more of the content right here. And I'm going to delete everything besides the outer div. And we can also leave the head right inside of here. This is going to be our home component, our home route. So inside of here, we can have our outer div, have something like a container. Then we're going to have the margin X auto, and then px, which is padding on a horizontal axis equal to 10, and then margin bottom equal to 8. Now, I know that this might seem like some sort of magic or crazy syntax happening right here. What am I even writing? Are these different class names or what's really happening? Well, as I've mentioned, we are using Tailwind. So if you're ever wondering throughout this video, what does a specific class mean? I'm going to show you how you can research it for every single class. But most of the classes are incredibly intuitive. So for example, you can notice that this is going to be a container div. More specifically, margin X means x-axis or horizontal axis. That means that the margin is going to be set to auto. The padding on a horizontal axis is going to be set to 10 specific points, and we also want to add some margin bottom. As we keep writing more utility classes, the more they're going to make sense. But again, if you're not sure about any of them, just feel free to type it out, go to Tailwind CSS docs, and in this search, just type it out. MB8, margin bottom 8, and that simply means margin bottom to rem. You can see it right here, it's even drawn out. Let's see what does the container property mean. There we go, container. The use of container class sets the max width of an element to match the min width of the current breakpoint. So basically, it gives it a specific width. Now let's continue with the creation of our interface. We can leave this head in, and I'm going to change this to something like CMS blog. Great. Below that, we're going to have one more div, and this div is going to have a class name equal to grid dash columns or cols dash 1, and then on large devices, it's going to have grid dash cols dash 12, and gap is going to be set to 12. Now inside of here, we'll be able to loop through all of our posts. So for now, before we actually fetch data using GraphQL, let's create a demo list of our posts. We can only give them a title. So const posts, that's going to be an array. And let's say that each post is an object that has a title. Before we used React testing. And let's also give it an excerpt. That's going to be something like learn React testing. And I'm going to add a comma and just duplicate this one more time. This is going to be React with Tailwind. And this is going to be learn React with Tailwind. These are just some demo titles and descriptions. So inside of here, we can actually map over them by saying posts.map. We're going to get our post and the index here, and we want to instantly return something. Later on, we're going to return a real post component here, but for now, what we can simply do is render out a div. And inside of there, we can render post.title, and then just below that, post.excerpt. Great. Again, later on, this is going to be a real post component. Let's save it and take a look in the browser. There we go. As you can see, we already have our div, and this is not quite centered, but let me show you what I mean. This container already has some width, margin, and padding, but we can do something like bg gray. And there we go. As you can see, we have our two posts. They are inside of a container, but it's hard to see right now, so let's add it some background. We can do that by saying bg gray, and then numbers from 100 to 900. Let's do something like light gray with 300. And there we go. Now you can see what I meant when I said that a container class gives it a specific width. Okay, I'm going to remove that, and now we can continue adding something below our posts. So that's going to be just below our grid. We can add one new div, and that div is going to have a class name equal to, and we want to do something only on large devices. So we can do that by saying LG column dash span dash 4 and column dash span dash 1, usually when we're not on large devices. Of course, to be able to use columns, we have to be inside of the grid. So I'm going to put this div inside of the grid container. And we have to wrap our posts with one more div. Let's not forget that. So right here, we're going to write this div and put our posts inside of it. There we go. So now we have our div for our posts and also one for two new categories and one for two new components. That's going to be the post widgets and categories. Right now, I'm going to give this one a class name as well. That's going to be LG call-span-8, and then usually call-span-1. Great. Now inside of this div, we're going to have one more div, and this div is going to have a class name. On large devices, make it sticky. Usually make it relative and top-8. Great. Let me show you what this div actually represents. This is our finished site, and the thing we're building right now is going to be this main view, the home. We are already looping through the articles, although they don't look that good now, but now we're building the right side, the recent posts and categories. So right here, we can add two new components that we are yet to create. So to create these components, we can go ahead and open up our file tree, and right next to pages, in the root of our folder, we can create a new folder called components. And for starters, we're going to need three different components. The first component is going to be the actual post card.jsx. The second component is going to be our categories component .jsx. And finally, the third one is going to be our post widget .jsx. And each one of these components is going to be a basic React arrow function component. I can get to that simply by typing RAFCE. If you have never used that RAFCE, just go to extensions and type snippets. There, you should be able to find ES7 React Redux GraphQL React Native snippets. So simply install that extension, and then you'll be able to do this. So inside of our post widget, we can simply type post widget. We can now copy that and paste it over to categories, but just make sure to change post widget to categories everywhere. And finally, let's repeat the same thing for the post card. Our post card can even accept the post itself. So right here as props, we're going to accept a post and do the same thing we did before. That's simply going to be post.title and below post.excerpt. Great. Now that we have all of these components, we're going to create one new index.js file inside of the components. This is going to allow us to more easily export and import those components by saying export default as, and then we can add the name of the component, in this case postcard, from /postcard. We can duplicate this 2 more times, the second time for the categories, and the third time for our post widget. Great. Now we can go inside of our pages, index.js, and inside of here, we can import those components. We can import them by simply saying import. In curly braces, that's going to be postcard, categories, and also the post widget. These are coming from /components. Great. Finally, we can use them right here. Instead of rendering out this div, we're going to actually render out a post card component, and we're going to pass the post as post to it. We can even put this in one line. There we go. And we're also going to give a key to each item, and that's going to be post.title. The title should be unique. Then inside of this div, we're going to render out the second 2 components. That's going to be the post widget right here. That's simply going to be a self-closing component. And then below that, we're going to render one more, and that's going to be the categories. Great. And with that, we are basically done for the JSX part of our home. I know it might seem simple, but the rest of the work is going to happen inside of the actual postcard and the other components. Let's save it and take a look. There we go. Looks extremely stupid at the moment. We only have 2 different articles on the left side and also the post widget and categories on the right side. Now let's add our global styles. Our global styles are going to be the only styles that won't be done using Tailwind CSS. So let's create a new folder, and the name of the folder is going to be just that, styles. Inside of there, we can simply create a new file called globals.scss. And what you can do right now is pause the video, head to the description, and then simply copy and paste it from the file mentioned in there. There's going to be a GitHub gist where you'll be able to simply copy and paste these styles. You're going to notice that these are just some basic styles for the HTML on the body, some text shadows, and then something more for featured posts and the carousel that we're going to have later on, but nothing special. So just to save your time, simply make sure to copy and paste this here. You're going to also notice that there's going to be an image called bg.jpg, or at least you have to save it as that. So just download that image and then put it inside of the public folder, call it bg.jpg, and we should have it right here. Once you've done that, we can go to our pages and then our _app.js. Inside of here, we're going to simply import in a string /styles/globals.scss. This is going to import all of our styles, and then we can continue creating more of our components, and then finally fetching the data using GraphQL and GraphCMS. Now, if we've done everything correctly, we should be able to see our background. And there we go. As you can see, the font changed, and we can also now see our background. Of course, there weren't many styles in that style sheet, so this changed just the background and almost nothing more. So now we're going to implement all of these components ourselves, the navbar, and then featured posts, and finally everything else. Let's go ahead and start with the navigation bar. We can start by creating a new component called header.jsx. Of course, just so we don't forget, we can immediately export it from our index.js, and that's going to be header. Now, inside of here, we can again use the RAFCE, and we're going to import React as well as the use context from React. Inside of here, we're going to also import a link, but no longer from React Router DOM. It's going to be just from next/link. And we are ready to start creating our header. More specifically, we can start by giving this div a class name, and that's going to be a container div. It's going to have the margin x auto, px, which is padding on horizontal axis, equal to 10, and then margin bottom equal to 8. Inside of that div, we're going to have one more div. This div is going to have a class name set to border-b, width-full, so just w-full. It's going to be an inline block, and it's going to have the border blue of 400, and finally padding on y-axis, which is vertical axis, set to 8. Now inside of there, we can create one more div. This div is going to have a class name set to MD, meaning only on medium devices. We want to have a float left, and usually we want to have it as a block element. Inside of that div, we're going to have a link component right here. That link is going to have an href equal just to /, and inside of there, we can create a span element. This span is going to have a class name equal to cursor-pointer. Also font-bold, text-4XL to make it extremely big, and then text-white. And finally, inside of there, you can enter the name of your blog. In this case, I'm simply going to say GraphCMS. Great. And then finally, below that on the right side, so that's going to be below this div that's below the link, we're going to have one more div. And this div is going to show the categories. So you can say class name is set to hidden. And then only on medium devices, we actually want to show it and make it float left. And usually we want to have it as contents. Now, this might be a bit weird one and not so intuitive. So let's copy it and let's go to Tailwind CSS. If we search for contents and click it, you'll see that we can use contents to create a so-called phantom container whose children act like direct children of their parent. So yeah, this is a specific one, but that's going to help us to create a navigation bar such as this one. As you can see, if I go to inspect and see how this looks like on mobile devices, we won't be able to see the categories on small devices. But if we increase that a bit to tablet size, we will be able to see them. So right here, we're going to say MD contents. Now inside of there, we want to map over the categories. Of course, we haven't yet fetched the real categories. So now let's just create a demo array that's going to be const categories. And each category is going to be an object that's going to have a name. And our first name can be something like React. And then it also needs a slug. Slug is going to be just React. Now the second category, so we can create a second object, is going to be name, something like web development. And then we can add a slug, which is going to be something like web-dev. And finally, now we can loop through those categories by using a dynamic block of code, categories.map. In here, we get one specific category, and we're simply going to map over them by displaying a link component for each category. Our link is going to have a key equal to category.slug to make it unique. And it's also going to have an href property pointing to /category and then category.slug. This is going to be a template string, so make sure to close it as so. Now inside of there, we're going to open it up and create a span element. Our span is going to have a class name equal to md float-right and also margin top mt2. We want to align it to the middle, make it text white, and also give it margin left 4. Make the font, let's do semi-bold, and then let's make the cursor equal to pointer. And inside of that span, we can render. That's going to be category.name. Great. We've just created our header, but now we have to make use of it. So to actually use this header, we're going to wrap it in a specific layout. And we're going to use a special layout component because we always want to show the header. So whenever we want to show something, we're always going to have that header inside of the layout and then the actual content. Let me show you what I mean. It's going to make more sense once we actually write it out. So that's going to be layout.jsx. That layout component is going to be as simple as it can be. React arrow function component, and in here, we're simply going to import, and that's going to be header from /. Now, the only thing we want to do is render out a React fragment. Inside of here, we're going to render out the actual header component, and then below that, we're going to render the children. So with every React component, you always get access to a special prop called children. Basically, whenever we call a layout component like this, and whatever we put into it, that something is going to be displayed right here inside of the children, and we're going to have the header just above that. So now we can actually export that layout component here by simply duplicating this line and saying layout right here. And finally, we can use that layout inside of our _app.js. First, we have to import it. So just at the top, I'm going to import a few things. That's going to be import React, also use effect and use state. We're going to use those later on. That's coming from React. And then finally, we also want to import that layout component by saying import layout from. That's going to be / components. Great. And now finally, instead of just rendering this component like this, we're going to render something else. I'm going to expand this into multiple rows like this. And that component is going to be wrapped with a layout. So we're always going to show something, that component, but that component is going to have the header above it. Because if you remember what we said, we're sending some children to our layout component, and that's going to be rendered right here below the header. So now if we save this and check it out, we should be able to see our header. Let's go to our localhost 3000, and there we go. GraphCMS, React, Web Development. But these are showing on the left side alongside GraphCMS. We want to show them on the right side. So let's see what happened. Inside of our header component, the only issue was this here, a misspelled right. As soon as we fix that, the issue should be fixed. And there we go. Our header is now done. We have this nice little border bottom, not sure if you can see it. We have our logo on the left side, and we have all of our categories on the right side. Of course, these are right now static, but soon enough, we're going to pull real data using GraphQL. Now is the time that we render out our posts. Before we actually code out the design and the JSX for our posts, now might be the best time to fetch real data coming from GraphCMS. To start fetching our data, we're going to create a new folder called Services, again in the root of our folder. Inside of there, we can create a new file called index.js. Inside of here, we're going to import two things from GraphQL request. That's going to be a request and GQL. And these things are coming from GraphQL, and that's going to be request. Now, if you haven't used GraphQL before, this is most likely the first time you're seeing this library. So let's go ahead and check it out on NPM. I simply Googled GraphQL request NPM on Google, and this is what we got. This is an extremely popular package with 1.6 million weekly downloads, and basically it's a minimal GraphQL client supporting Node and browsers. That doesn't really say a lot, but essentially it allows us to make GraphQL queries. We import these two things, we create the query and say what do we want to fetch and from where. So let's create our first GraphQL request. We're going to create a new function and immediately export it. So that's going to be export const get posts. That's going to be an arrow function, more specifically an async arrow function. And then inside of there, we can say const query is equal to GQL and then a template string. And then in next row, we can actually write our query right inside of here. And the query usually starts like this, query, and then you can add a name, something like my query. And then in here, we can start fetching our posts. Now, thankfully, we won't have to do all of this manually because these queries can get long. So we are back on our GraphCMS dashboard and we're going to go to API Playground. There we go. Inside of here, we can choose what do we want to fetch. So let's go to Explorer, and then from here, we'll be able to choose what do we want to query. We're going to go to Posts Connection. And inside of here, we want to choose Edges. From inside of the edges, we're going to choose Node, and you can see that our node contains all the information that we want to get. We want to get the author, and from author, we want to get the bio, as well as the name. We can get the ID, and we can also get the photo URL. Where is it? There we go. You can see this is creating our query as we speak. Now, if you keep scrolling down, we also want to get the created add property right here. So we're going to add that to the query. We also want to get the slug, and we want to get the title. We also need the excerpt. There we go. Our excerpt is right here. And finally, we want to get the featured image, more specifically, featured image.url. And finally, we also need the categories. So let's try to find the categories. I can use our Control F. These are not the categories we're looking for. We're looking for the categories inside of a specific post, and here they are. For each category, we're gonna need a name as well as the slug. Great. As you can see, this just created the entire query for us. Of course, you could have written this by hand, but this just makes it so much easier. We can click this play button right here, and our data has been automatically generated on the right side in real time. As you can see, we're getting the data with posts connection, and then inside of those edges, we have our first post containing all of the data that we specified right inside of the node right here. That's going to be the author, including all of the author properties, created at, slug, title, excerpt, featured image, categories, including the name and the slug. So now we can copy this and go back to our code. Finally, we can paste it straight inside of here. And this is how you fetch data using GraphQL and GraphCMS. Great. So now that we have our query, we actually have to make a request to get it. And we can make a request right here below by saying const result is equal to await request. And then in here, we need to specify the GraphQL API as well as the query. Now the question is, where are we getting this GraphQL API from? Well, we can create it right here at the top by saying const GraphQL API is equal to process.env dot next underscore public underscore GraphCMS underscore endpoint. Now we can copy that and we can create a new .env variable. We want to keep this endpoint safe and secure. So let's create a new file called .env. Of course, this shouldn't be using capital letters, so just make it use lowercase letters. And inside of here, we can paste the name of our variable. And now we need to find that endpoint inside of our GraphCMS. And we can get to our endpoint by going to settings right here, and then finally environments. Simply copy it right here, go back to your code, and paste it straight into here. Now, to actually update this environment variable, we have to go to View, Terminal, press Ctrl+C to stop it from running, and then run npm run dev one more time. And once we actually fetch the results, what we can do is simply return result.postsConnection.edges. These are going to be our posts. Of course, this here is going to be result. Let's save this file and let's use it inside of our pages and then index. Inside of here, we're going to import, that's going to be get posts, and this is coming from .. and that's going to be services. Finally, we don't need to create our demo posts anymore. We can delete that right now, and we can use a special Next.js way to fetch data inside of our components. To do that, we don't have to actually write it inside of our component, which is something entirely new. We create a new async function called getStaticProps at the bottom of this component. Export async function getStaticProps, and we call that as a normal function. And in here, we can say const posts is equal to await get posts, as we would usually do inside of the use effect. Of course, we can make our posts equal to that, or we can simply wrap that into parentheses. And if we don't get that data, we can simply say or empty array. And finally, you have to return it like this by saying return an object. Inside of the object, we have props, and then inside of those props, we can return the posts. This is how you fetch data using getStaticProps in Next.js. Now that we're fetching the posts, the question is, how can we use them inside of our home component? And the answer is incredibly simply. We can use them as props. So our posts are coming as props to our component, just to the fact that we're using this special getStaticProps function. So now we're no longer looping over our demo array with two different posts. We are actually looping through all of our posts that we have in our GraphCMS. Right now we have one post there, but of course we can create much more later on. But of course, we have to make sure that we're actually seeing 1 if we've done everything correctly. So if we go back to our localhost 3000 and reload the page, right now we are getting an error saying not allowed, and then in here 403 with path, posts, connection, edges. This error is not giving us a lot of information. So let's open up the inspect tab and we can again see the error uncaught. We don't get a lot of information. Let's see if we mess something up. And again, I always like to include those errors in the video because these things can happen to everybody and nobody is perfect. So you just have to get the error, try to debug it, and then continue with the work. The error is most likely going to be inside of the services. So let's see if we mess something up. We are importing request and GQL from GraphQL request. We're creating our new GraphQL API by using the endpoint from environment variables. We are saying export const get posts, which is an async function, including the query, which is equal to GQL, and then there's a template string. We pass in our query, and we want to get the posts connection. Inside of there, we want to get the edges, but I'm going to indent this properly. Inside of that node, we want to get the author. So let's simply indent all of these properly. Inside of the author, we're getting all of these, so that's fine. Created that, featured image, categories. This seems all right to me and looks like everything is properly closed. We have the result here with the await request, GraphQL API, which is this correct API, and a query right here. Return result posts connection dot edges. This seems completely fine to me. Since this file is looking good, let's try to go to GraphCMS and see if we have to grant some permissions. We can go to settings again, and let's go to API access. If we scroll down, maybe let's try clicking yes, initialize defaults. And hopefully now we should have access to read all of the posts we've created. I reloaded the page and there we go. We can see nothing right now, but no more errors, which means that we should be good. Now let's go to our post component and let's actually render out all of the great details we have in our first demo post. To do that, we can go to our posts. As you can see in here, we're fetching them. We're getting them straight right here to the props, and then we are looping over them and passing one by one post into the post card. So this is where we actually have to create the JSX. We can start by importing the moment library, which we're going to use to format the date. And then finally, we can also import a link from next/link. Great. We're getting the post, and now instead of rendering these two things, let's actually render out a new div. And this div is going to have a class name equal to bg-white, shadow-lg, rounded-lg. Padding is going to be set to 0. And then on large devices, we're going to increase the padding to 8. And we're going to set the padding bottom to be equal to 12 and margin bottom to be equal to 8. Now inside of there, we're going to have one more div. This div is going to have a class name set to relative. Overflow is going to be set to hidden. It's going to have a shadow-md medium. And finally, padding bottom is going to be set to 80 and margin bottom is going to be set to 6. This is for our image. So right inside of here, we can render out the image by using the image self-closing tag, setting the source to be equal to post.featuredImage.url. And now might be a good time to see what other data are we getting from the post. So we can say console.log and we can console log the post. Before we go ahead and check it out, let's just finish up our image. We can add the alternative tag, which is going to be post.title. And then finally below that, we can add a class name to this image. It can be object-top absolute dash 80, which is height. Then we're going to have the width dash full, object dash cover, shadow dash LG, rounded dash T dash LG, and then finally on large devices, rounded dash LG. Now, if you don't know some of these properties, definitely make sure to check out Tailwind docs. Now let's save it and take a look in the browser. As you can see, we immediately get cannot read properties of undefined reading URL, which means that we're still not getting the proper data from GraphCMS. So we can comment out this image for now and simply save it, then reload the page one more time. As you can see, we do get a post right here. And as you can see in the console log, we're getting an object that is containing a node. Node is basically our post. It contains all the data, but it's not just inside of this object, it's inside of the node. So to get the actual data, we have to say post.node. Let's see if we can simplify that somehow. Inside of the index, we can right here simply send post.node instead of simply sending the entire post, because the node itself is actually the post. Now let's see if we console log this, are we going to get the right data? I'm going to reload the page, and there we go. Now we have the author, we have the photo, created that, categories, everything we need. With that, we should be able to bring this back. Let's save it, and there we go. This is our post image. Now we're ready to start creating all the other things that this post has. And it might be a good idea to put the browser side by side by the editor so that we can see all the changes live. There we go. If I space out the browser and the code editor like this, we can see the changes live on the right side. Now below this image div, we want to implement an h1, which is going to be the heading of our post. We can give it a few class names. So class name is equal to, that's going to be transition, duration 700. This is a new interesting way to learn that we can also do animations using Tailwind. We're going to give it a property of text center, as well as the margin bottom set to 8. Cursor is going to be set to pointer. So cursor pointer. And then this is going to be a really long line, so we can split it into multiple lines, hopefully. And we can continue by saying hover. Let's do something like text-pink-600. Then we're going to make the text larger by saying text-3XL and font semi-bold. Finally, inside of that h1, we need to render a link. So we can write here, say link. This link is going to have an href, which is going to be equal to a template string like this. That's going to be /post/ and then post.slug. And our link can simply render out the post.title. Now let's save this. And as you can see, we have React testing. And if we hover over it, it slowly animates to this pinkish color. Great. Of course, we can put this in one line like this. And there we go. This is our h1. So if you want to add a transition, looks like I have a typo here. This should have been transition, but there we go. Duration is set to 700, but if I set it to 100 and do it like this, see, now it happens almost instantaneously. So now below this h1, let's add a div. Our div is going to have a class name set to block. On LG, it's going to be flex. It's going to be text center. It's going to have the items dash center as well as the justify dash center. It's going to have the margin bottom set to 8. So that's going to be MB8 and then width dash full or just W dash full. Inside of that div, we're going to have one more div. This div is going to have a class name. And I just noticed that in here, that should have been block. Right here, we're going to have the flex, the items dash center, justify dash center, MB dash 4, which is margin bottom 4. On large devices, margin bottom 0, and then we're going to have the W full to take the full width. On large devices, we're going to set the width to auto by using W-auto. Margin right is going to be 8, and that's it. Now inside of there, we want to render out the author image. So we can create a new image tag like this. Inside of there, let's add the alt tag, which is going to be post.author.name. We can set the height to be equal to something like 30 pixels. We can also do the same thing for the width. We can set the class name to be something like align-middle and also rounded-full. Finally, the most important image property is the source. That's going to be post.author.photo.url. Let's save it. And there we go. JavaScript Mastery logo appeared right here. Right next to it, we just want to create a p tag. And inside of that p tag, we're going to simply say post.author.name. We can save that. There we go. Simply JSM in this case. Let's add a few more properties. So class name. And I'm going to press Ctrl S with every property that I type. That way you'll be able to exactly see what each Tailwind class does. So that's going to be inline. That specifically didn't do anything right now. We're going to say align middle. Also text-gray-700. That's going to just make the text a bit more gray. It's not noticeable right now though. We're going to give it a margin left to text-LG. There we go. That made it just a bit bigger. Finally, below this div, we want to have one more div. This is going to be for our date. So right here, we can say class name is equal to font-medium, as well as the text-gray-700. Now inside of there, we're going to render the SVG component. That SVG is going to be down in the description between all of the gists as well, on GitHub, of course. So you can simply copy and paste this SVG. An SVG is like an icon. You can see it right here. And below that SVG, we're going to add a span. And then inside of that span, we're going to use the moment library to simply say post.created add. And we can say dot format and put a string day, and that's going to be YYYY. This is the date format that we can use. If we use 2 M's, that's going to make it a number. But if you use 3, that's going to put it in a shortened month object. This is the date, and finally, this is the year. And the library we just used is called moment. Finally, below this div and below one more div right here, we're going to render a p tag. And this p tag is simply going to render the post.excerpt. There we go. You can see it doesn't look that good right now. But if we add a class name, that's going to be text-center. There we go. That centered it. That's going to be text-LG. Also text-gray-700. Font-normal. px-4, which is the horizontal padding 4. On large devices, padding 20. And then finally margin bottom 8 so that we can divide it from the rest of the content. Below that div, we're going to have one final thing, which is going to be a div. This div is going to have a class name equal to text-center. Inside of there, we're going to have a link tag. And that link is going to have an href equal to /post/post.slug. Inside of there, we want to have a span element. So right here, let's create a span that's simply going to say continue reading. Now inside of here, we can add a class name. And let's first see how does it look like this. There we go, continue reading. But now we can add utility classes. First, let's say transition. Duration is going to be something like 500. Then we're going to set that to transform. On hover, we want to do minus translate minus -y-1. Let's save that and see if we can see the changes immediately. Nope, nothing yet. Let's keep adding more styles. That's going to be inline dash block. And let's give it a background, bg-pink-600. There we go. That's already starting to look more like a button. And now you can see that little jump that the button does once you hover over it. We can continue with more classes like text-lg, font-medium, rounded-full. It's starting to look a bit more like a button right now. Let's do text-white, and finally padding on horizontal axis equal to 8, padding on vertical axis equal to 3, and finally cursor-pointer. And with that, we just created a Tailwind button. There were a lot of utility classes used. We also added some little animation, as you can see. But there you go. This is a really custom button that doesn't look like a Material UI button or a Bootstrap button. This is the button that you've created right now. And there we go. This is our post card. Right now we have only one post, but right now using GraphCMS, we can easily add so many more posts, and they're all going to be listed right here, as you can see this one. So just for variety purposes, let's add one more post inside of GraphCMS. To do that, we can go to Content, Post, and let's simply try to duplicate this one. So we can go into it, and then finally, right here, duplicate. We can call this one something like Next.js is the future of web. This is going to be Next.js. We can leave this the same as well as the content, but we can change the image. So I'm going to say replace featured image, and we're going to upload a new one from the link. I'm again going to use a URL from here, from the old blog, and simply paste it as a link right here. Of course, you can use any image that you want. Let's upload it. There we go. It's a draft currently, and the post is going to be by JSM, and let's click Save and Publish. We also want to publish the image. That's correct. And if we save that, our entry has been published, and immediately, let's reload the page. There we go. Our second blog appeared right here, and it's looking great. The only thing that I can see is that the image is a bit skewed. If you see on our original blog, that doesn't seem to be the case. So let's go ahead and fix that right away. That's going to be inside of our post card, object top, absolute, H80. There we go, object, cover, and also rounded. There we go. I made some typos, so sorry about that, but hopefully we're gonna be good right now. I saved it, and if we go back to our CMS blog, this is already looking so much better. We have our categories and our navigation bar on the top, and all of our articles being fetched directly from GraphCMS using GraphQL querying language. Great. Now our next steps are going to be to implement the post widget and categories. And if we look at the live side, that looks something like this. All of the recent posts are going to be listed here, and then we're going to show all the categories that we'll be able to browse through. So let's go ahead and do that right now. If you think about it, we've already created components for our categories and our post widget. So let's start right here. Inside of our post widget, we're going to import a few things. That's going to be import moment from moment, and we're also going to import link from, that's going to be next/link. Great. Right here, to be able to render something, we first have to fetch the right data. If we check the already done version, we have to fetch all of the most recent posts. So now we already have a pretty good idea of how we can do that. We can go to our services, and then in here, we're going to create a one more function with one more GraphQL query that's going to get the recent posts for us. So right here below this function, inside of the index of services, we can create a new export const get recent posts. And this is again going to be an async function like this. And inside of that function, we're again going to have a query. So we can say query is equal to GQL, a template string. Again, we need to close that template string. And then inside of there, we're going to say query get post details right here. And now we can learn one more thing from GraphQL. Right here, we can get the newest posts that were created by doing posts. And right here, we can say order by, and that's going to be created at, and then underscore ascending. So these are going to be the newest posts. We're going to space it out properly. And right below that, we're going to simply say last 3 like this. Of course, we could have created this query inside of GraphCMS editor as well. But this time I wanted to show you how we can do it manually. So what do we want to get from these posts? Well, the title, also the featured image, more specifically the URL from that image. We also want to get the created at property, and then finally the slug. And now the situation is going to be basically the same. We can even copy these 2 lines. Once we have the query, we need to get the data by doing request, GraphQL API, query, and then in this case, that's simply going to be result.posts. Great. So now inside of the post widget, we can now actually call the get recent posts function. We can do that by importing the use state as well as the use effect from React. And then we can create a new use state by starting to type use state and clicking here. We can name it something like related posts. You can click tab and then we can set it to an empty array at the start. Now we can get the use effect right here. Again, autofill it. Inside of here, we want to know if we're seeing the post widget right here on the home page or in a specific article page. Because on our home page, we can see the recent posts, but if we go to the article page, we can see the related posts. So there's going to be a difference. Keeping that in mind, to know the difference, we can check the slug. And the slug is going to be something that we're going to pass into the post widget component. So the 2 things that we're going to pass later on are going to be the categories as well as the slug. So we can simply say if there is a slug, and slug being simply the path of the specific article. For example, if I click here, this entire thing here is a slug. So if there is a slug, in that case, we want to call some kind of a function called get similar posts. And we can get the similar posts by knowing the category that this post is in and then passing the slug. And we can simply do a dot then, and then we can get the actual result. With that result, we simply want to set related posts to be equal to result. So we want to get similar or related posts if we have a slug, meaning if we're viewing a specific article at the moment. And if we're not looking at a specific article, in that case, we want to do a similar thing. So I'm going to copy this, but it's not going to be get similar posts. It's going to be get recent posts. And in that case, we don't have to pass any parameters because we're not at a specific article right now. Great. So the question is, where are these functions coming from? And we've already created one, if you think about it. We can go to import, get recent posts. We just created that at /services. It is right inside of here. That was this query. But while we're here, we can also create the get similar posts, which is going to be just a bit different. So let's create a new query. That's going to be const, or rather export const, get similar posts, which is going to be an async function like this. There we go. Inside of there, we do the same thing. Const query is equal to GQL, a template string like this. We need to close it. And there we're going to have the query get post details like this. That get post details in GraphQL language, we can do something that looks like this. We can pass in the $slug, and we need to specify the type, and that's going to be a string. And then we can pass another parameter, which is going to be $categories. And that's going to be an array of strings like this. And once we specified the params we're passing in, we can do the same querying we've done before. It's going to look just a bit different. So we're trying to get the posts where, we can say where, and in an object, slug is not. So slug not is slug. Why don't we want to get the current slug? Because that's the post we're looking at right now. We want to show all of the related posts, but not that one. And then we can use the and, that's going to be another object. Categories underscore sum is equal to an object where we say slug underscore in $categories. So basically what we're saying is don't display the current article, but display other articles that include some of the categories that we want to get. And then we want to get just the last 3 articles. So we can specify that last 3. This is how you write more complicated GraphQL queries. Of course, it would be incredibly interesting to see how we can write these queries inside of GraphCMS. And we're going to write so many more queries later on in the video using GraphCMS Playground. So what do we want to get from these articles? Well, it's going to be the same thing as we get here. So we're going to copy this object, title, featured image, created ad, and a slug. We can paste it right here. And then the situation is going to be the same. That's going to be simply const result, await request, and then return result.posts. That situation is mostly going to be the same. Now let's save it. And inside of our post widget, we can right here import get similar posts. Now we have almost everything that we need. This use effect is going to change only when the slug changes, like this. And let's say that for now, we simply want to console log the related posts. There we go. In here, I have a typo. This here should have been categories that we're passing into it. So now if you think about it, we should be accepting these 2 props to this post widget component, but we're not accepting them right now. And if you can see that, yep, definitely nothing coming in. But that's completely fine because we're going to call this component from 2 different places. The first one is going to be the home. That's going to happen right inside of here. But the second time that we display it, it's going to be inside of a specific article. Then we need to pass some props. Right now, we don't. We simply want to get the most recent articles, and that's it. So if you don't pass the props you're accepting, they're simply going to be undefined. And in this case, that's completely all right. So now finally, let's create the JSX for our post widget. That's going to be a div that's going to have a class name equal to bg-white. If I do that, you can immediately see that it changed on the right side. Let's give it a shadow-lg. There we go. Let's also do rounded-lg. There we go. Changes the look immediately. Let's do padding-8. There we go. And let's do margin bottom, so MB-8. Just to push these categories a bit below. Hopefully Tailwind is starting to make so much more sense. You can see that there aren't many utility classes. We're mainly repeating the ones we've used before. Now inside of there, I'm going to show an H3. That H3 is going to check if there is a slug. If there is a slug, that means that we want to see related posts of a specific article. Else, we simply want to see recent posts like this. As you can see, right now, we just want to get the recent because there is no slug. We're not looking at a specific article right now. We are on the home page. So let's add some class names. That's going to be text-xl, also margin bottom 8. Let's do font-semi-bold. Something like border-b is going to do the trick. That's going to give it a border bottom, and padding bottom 4. There we go. The border is barely visible, but it's there. Now we want to map over all of our posts. So we can do that right here below. If we go over the related posts like this, dot map. So in here we get a specific post, and we simply want to show something for each post, and that something is going to be a div. Our div is going to have a key equal to post.title, and we want to have a class name. Our class name is going to be flex items dash center w dash full for full width, and margin bottom MB4. Great. Now let's render out the div that's going to contain our image. That div is going to have a class name w16 flex dash none. Inside of there, we can show a basic image tag like this, and it's going to have the alternative text equal to post.title. Let's also do something like height is going to be set to 60 pixels, and also the width is going to be set to 60 pixels. Of course, we need the class name. That's going to be align dash middle and rounded dash full. And finally, the source is the most important thing, post.featured image.url. If we save that, you can see the image of our two posts that we have right now. Below that div, we want to display one more div. This div is going to have a class name equal to flex-grow ml-4. And inside of there, we simply want to leave a p tag that's going to render out the moment library, and that's going to be post.created at, and then we simply want to say dot format. That's going to be mmm space dd comma and then YYYY. There we go. With that, we're gonna get the date. Of course, let's give it some class names. Something like class name is equal to text-gray-500 font-xs. There we go. And finally, we also want to add a link to that article. So we can say link href is going to be equal to a template string to /post/post.slug. We can also give it a class name equal to text-md. And looks like we have an error right now that's saying multiple children were passed a link with href of post React testing, but only one child is supported. So let's try to add a specific key to this. And a key is going to be simply the post.title. Let's see if this fixes it. Okay, even though we entered the key, we still have the issue. So let's think about it. We're doing /post/post.slug. And we were doing the similar thing somewhere else, but not in this file. Now, inside of there, we want to render something, of course, and that something is going to be post.title. If we save that, there we go, that worked. That was just a small error we've had. But right now we can click on these articles and they should point to a specific slug. Of course, right now we're getting a 404 because we haven't yet created the article details page. But as you can see, we have our recent posts. And again, as you keep adding them, they're going to appear here. The second thing we have to do is to implement the categories. That's the second card that looks extremely similar to our recent posts. If we go inside of our index.js, you'll be able to notice that we are calling the post widget here, as well as the categories. So let's go to the categories component. And as you can see right now, that's a blank React component. So let's start by importing a few things. We're going to import a use state as well as the use effect coming from React. And then we're going to also need a link. So that's going to be import link from next link. Now, as we had to fetch recent posts for the card above, we have to fetch categories for the categories card. So let's go to our services, index.js, and right inside of here, we can create the get categories call. Again, the procedure is going to be the same. That's going to be the export const get categories. That's going to be an async function like this. And inside of there, we're again going to have a query, which is equal to GQL. We have a template string. And then inside of there, we can specify the query, something like get categories. And just call that as an object. And let's specify categories. And what do we want to pull? We simply want to get the name as well as the slug. So right here, that's going to be name and slug. This is going to immediately give us all of the categories that we need. And finally, we can copy this. That's going to be const result is equal to await request. And then in this case, that's going to be result dot categories. Great. So now we can go back to categories, and right inside of here, we can import the function we've just created by saying import get categories from services. And then we can create a new state field by saying use state, clicking here, and that's going to be categories. Press tab one more time and set the initial value to be an empty array. Then we can create a use effect. Every use effect has a callback function, and it also has a dependency array. In this case, we want to leave the dependency array to be empty, meaning that we're only going to call this at the start to fill in our categories. So let's call our get categories. We can use the .then here. We are going to get our new categories from the API call, and then we can simply do set categories is equal to new categories. And this is how we're fetching data from GraphQL, or rather GraphCMS, through GraphQL querying language. Right now we have an error, so let's check our index services right here. And I've just noticed the error. In here we have a colon, but in GraphQL we don't need colons at all, so this is going to fix our query. Just keep that in mind. We're not working with JSON, we're not working with JavaScript objects, we're working with GraphQL queries. Great. So now we're ready to get these categories, and then we can simply render them. Our outer div is going to be the same as with our posts. So let's go to our post widget, and we can copy the first 4 lines, which is going to be the div and the h3. Let's go back to categories and just paste it here. We're going to have BG white, shadow LG, rounded LG, P8, margin bottom 8, and let's also give it padding bottom 12. Of course, we don't have access to this slug here, and that's not what we want to say. In this case, we're going to have a constant h3 that's going to say categories. And there we go. We have our category section. The last thing we have to do is actually map over the categories. That's going to be categories.map. We're going to get a specific category, and then we want to show a link for each one. So right here, let's display a link. That link is going to have a key equal to category.slug to make it unique, and it's going to have an href equal to a template string /category/category.slug. And inside of there, we can create a span element. This span is going to have a class name equal to, let's do cursor dash pointer, let's do block, and finally let's do padding bottom 3 and margin bottom 3. If we save that, we can see that we need to render something in there, and that something is going to be category.name. And there we go. Right now we just have one category of web development. Let's try to add a few more so that we can see them here. For that, we can go to our GraphCMS, to our content, and finally category. We can create one more item. let's do something like React. And the slug is going to be React, and save and publish. There we go. As soon as we go back to our blog, reload the page, we can see React right here. Now that we can see our categories here, we also need to fix them on the navigation bar. You might think that this is fine right now because we have Web Development React and Web Development React right here. But if we go to our header component right here, you can notice that in this case, we're simply hard coding them. So we need to fetch our real categories in the header file as well. And to do that, we can copy and paste most of the logic. I'm going to copy the use effect and the use state, as well as the services. And by the way, I'm holding the Alt key while selecting new lines. That way, everything is going to be imported. Or you can just copy and paste line by line. Now we can go into our header, and I'm going to paste everything right here. So from React, we're simply going to use state and use context. Then we don't need this line, we don't need these categories, and we're simply going to pull these lines inside of the actual component and fix the indentation. There we go. With that, we now have our real categories right inside of this file, and we can save them, and there we go. That means that our entire front page is now done. We can list the articles, we can see who made them and when. We can also see the images, recent posts right here, as well as the categories on the right side and on the navigation bar. Now, let's actually create a new page for our article details. To create our article or post details, we can create one more component. But it's not going to be just a basic component. It's going to be a Next.js page. And we can create it right here under Pages, and we're going to create a new folder called Post. Inside of the post, we're going to create a new file with a special name. Opening square bracket, slug, closing square bracket, .js. Next.js has something known as file-based routing, meaning you don't have to do all the routing as you usually do inside of the app.js using React Router DOM. With Next.js, you just put your files as you want them to be structured later on in the actual URL. For example, our index.js is going to show when you go to localhost 3000. And then if you create a folder called post, that's going to be /post. And finally, if you create a slug specifically with square brackets, that means that this is going to be dynamic. So if you go to /123, it's going to think about 123 as that slug, and it's going to render this file. So let me show you what I mean. I'm going to create the RAFCE, a React functional component, and the name is going to be something like post details. Now, inside of the post details component, we're going to import, that's going to be get posts, as well as the get post details from //services. These are the endpoints we are yet to create. And then we're also going to import a few components that we haven't yet created. So let's just start by importing them first. That's going to be import and a special component called post detail that's going to contain the content of our post. Then we're going to have the categories. Finally, a post widget, which we already have. Then we're going to have the author, comments, and finally comments form. And this is coming from, that's going to be one more time, components. Great. So now we have everything we want to use, but of course we are yet to create most of these components. So we can start right now. In this post details component, I'm simply going to write post details here. And right now, if we go on a specific article like this, post 123, you can see that we indeed do get post details. Same thing would happen if we clicked on a specific article. There we go, post React testing. Later on, we'll be able to retrieve the React testing value to get the actual post details. But for now, let's create the structure of our post details component. We're going to have a div that's going to have a class name equal to container, margin x auto, padding x10, and margin bottom is going to be 8. Then we're going to have one more div inside of there. So that's going to be class name is equal to grid-cols-1, and then on large devices, grid-cols-12, and then the gap is going to be 12. Inside of that, we're going to have one final div, and this div is going to have a class name equal to call-span-1, and on large devices, that's going to be call-span-8. So that means that this div is going to take 8 out of 12 spaces. We can also create one new one below by duplicating this one. And on small devices, it's also going to take 1 space, but on large devices, it's going to take 4. Now, inside of this first div, we want to render our components. First, we're going to render our post detail component, like a self-closing tag. Then we're going to render our author component. Below that, we want to render the comments form. And finally, below the form, that's going to be the comments themselves. Great. And for the second div, we're going to have one more div inside of it, like this. It's going to have a class name equal to relative. And on large devices, it's going to be sticky and top-8. Inside of there, we're going to have our post widget, which we already created. And we're also going to have the categories, which we also created. Great. So now is the time that we just create a boilerplate code for all of these components and properly export them. So let's start with post details. I'm going to create a post. Keep in mind, it's going to be detail, post detail.jsx. That's going to be an RAFCE. And inside of there, we can simply render post detail. We can even make it an H1 just so it's more visible. There we go. Post detail inside of the H1. Now we can copy the contents of this file and we can create our second component, which is going to be author.jsx. Inside of there, I'm going to paste everything and simply change this to author. Finally, we can create the next component, which is going to be the comments form.jsx. Again, paste everything and just change it to comments form so we know what it is. And the last component is going to be the comments themselves. Again, we can paste everything and simply change it to comments. Of course, we also have to export these components. So that's going to be, the first one is author. Then we're also going to have the comments form and the comments themselves. And there's one more that we're missing, and that's going to be the post detail. Great. I might be missing something, but we can easily fix it later on. Now, if we go to our slug.js, this is going to be our basic structure. Let's see how does it look like. There we go. This makes sense. On the right side, we have our recent posts and categories, which are already done. But on the left side, we are yet to implement the post detail and everything else. One more thing I can notice is that these don't seem to be H1s, but that doesn't really matter since we're going to implement the real components right now. So the question is, how are we going to get the post detail data? And the answer is we're going to use the get static props, something that we've already used before inside of our pages. We can basically copy this function inside of the index.js. We can go to slug, and right below export default, we can put our export async function get static props. In this case, we're going to get params as a parameter, and the params is going to be the slug. Remember, this here is the slug, or let's say a unique URL to a specific resource. So how can we now fetch the post details? Well, we of course have to create the endpoint from our services. So let's go to our services. And inside of here, we have to create a new endpoint that's going to get the entire data about everything that we need. We are already getting almost everything in this case, so we can simply copy and paste the entire get posts. We can scroll down a bit. And just below our get posts, we can post our get post details. That's also going to be async, but we are getting a slug right here when we call it. Then we have our query. In here, we can rename the query to something like get post details. And in GraphQL, we can call this as a function, and in there say $slug is equal to, and then that's going to be a string exclamation mark. We're just saying that we're accepting a slug that's going to be a string. And then just before we fetch the data, we can do it like this by saying post parentheses where, and then we can say an object slug is equal to $slug. So we only want to get that specific article. In that case, we don't need post connections, we also don't need edges, and we don't need a node. We simply want to get everything from that specific post, so we can put an opening brace right here. And I know that these queries are getting long and it's easy to make a mistake here, so I'm going to give a link to this entire file with the queries just below this video, so feel free to copy it and paste it right here. In this case, I'm going to write it out, fix the indentation a bit, and remove a few of these. There we go. So we are getting a post where slug is equal to slug, and then we want to get a few things. Let me see what we already have. We want to get a title and the excerpt. We already have that. We want to get the featured image and the URL. We also want to get the author, including the bio, name, photo, URL, and everything. We need the created at property. We also need the categories, but in this case, we also need just one more thing, and that's going to be content and raw. This is going to give us access to the post's content. And just below, in this case, we want to pass a request and pass slug in an object as the third parameter. These are, as you can see here, variables. Finally, in this case, we simply want to return result.post. Great. Now, if you go back to our slug, we can actually make a request to this function we've just created. So let's delete this and say const data is equal to await get post details params dot slug. Let's fix this, and that's going to be it. We're calling the get post details and passing the slug of a specific post. Finally, we can return not posts anymore. That's going to be post is equal to data. Great. Now, as you know, in Next.js, we get what we pass here as props to our component. So right here, we're getting the post. I'm quickly going to fix the indentation right here. There we go. And we also need to fix it here. That's good. And we can pass the information to each one of our components. To our post detail, we're going to pass the post equal to our post. Our author is going to need the author, so that's going to be post.author. Then below that, in our comments form, we're going to need the slug. So right here, we can say slug is equal to post.slug. And for the comments, we also need the slug is equal to post.slug because we need to know to which post do these comments belong to. Finally, to our post widget, we only want to pass the slug to each category. We can do that by saying post.categories dot, and that's going to be map. In here, we get a specific category, and we simply want to return category.slug for each one of these categories. Now we have all the data that we need, and we can start working on these individual components. Let's see if we have an error here. It's saying that cannot read property author of undefined. So it looks like we don't have access to the post. So let's try to console log the post right here. There we go. And I'm going to open up the inspect element and go to console, reload the page. And looks like get static paths is required for dynamic server-side generation pages and is missing /post/slug. So yeah, that's true. In Next.js, when you have a dynamic URL like this, you need to add get static paths. That's another special Next.js function that we can create just below this one. So we can create it right here, export async function. That's going to be get static paths, and then simply a function. First, we can get the posts by saying const posts is equal to await get posts. Keep in mind, we're getting these posts from here. That's another GraphQL query, the first one we wrote. And just below, we can return something. In this case, we're going to return an object containing paths. Now, what we can do is we can say posts.map. In here, we get a specific post, but we can destructure that post to get the node out of it. And then we can destructure one more time to get the slug. Now, we simply want to return something, and that something is params is set to slug. So basically, we need to specify what kind of articles are we going to have. With this, our Next.js application is going to know all of the possible paths that we can go to, /post/React testing, and also /post/ I think it was web development or Next.js in that case. So Next.js has to research all of the possible dynamic paths so that it can statically render them. And finally, we're going to add a comma here and say fallback to false. That's going to be everything that we need to do in this case. And the error should be gone, but we do get one more error. And the error says variable slug must be defined. So let's see where this is coming from. It could be from services. And let's see if we're mentioning slug here. It's getting as a prop here, but that's when we're calling the post details right here. So that's fine. We're passing the params.slug. Let's try to really read what the error says. Variable slug must be defined. The reason why we're getting this error is not because of the get post details function. Let's see what's really happening. If we go to our slug, in here you can see that we are sending out the slug and the categories to our post widget. And what's really happening here? In here, we're checking if there is a slug. Remember, before we were just covering this portion of the code, but now we are checking if there is a slug, and we are sending over the categories and a slug to the get similar post GraphQL query. And this query is indeed accepting the slug and the categories, so we have to pass them as parameters. And to be able to fill them in, we have to pass them as variables as the third parameter inside of an object in this GraphQL request. If we do that right now, everything works as you can see, and we can close this. Great. So now we're properly passing all of the data to all of our components, and we can start implementing one by one, starting with post detail. Inside of our post detail, we're of course accepting a post itself here. And right here, we can start by adding a class name. That's going to be something like BG white and also shadow-LG. Let's do rounded to make it rounded as well. And on large devices, that's going to be padding 8, usually padding bottom 12, and let's do margin bottom 8. We can already save that and see how does it look like. So much better already. Now, it might be a good idea to put this here so we can see it like this and collapse this just a bit more. There we go. So inside of that div, we're going to have one more div for our image. That div is going to have a class name to relative, also overflow-hidden. It's going to have a shadow-md, and it's going to have margin bottom 6. Inside of there, we want to have our image. So let's create a new image tag, and we can split it in a few rows. We need to add a source src, which is going to be post.featuredimage.url. We also want to give it an alt tag, which is going to be post.title with 1 T. And finally, that's going to be a class name. Let's do something like object-top. Let's say height full and width full. Let's see how does it look like already. There we go. And let's make it a bit rounded to the top by saying rounded T and that's going to be LG. Great, this image looks fine, and just below this div, let's implement another div. This div is going to have a class name of px4, and on large devices, we're going to set that padding to be equal to 0. There we go, nothing changed, but let's start by adding one more div inside of that div. It's going to have a class name set to flex. Also, it's going to be items-center, margin bottom 8, and finally, width is going to be set to full. Just added a bit of height, but now we're going to add one more image, which is going to be for the author. And if I'm not mistaken, we already used that author somewhere. So let's try to find it by looking for author. And there we go. Inside of here, we have our div that contains the author photo URL and also author name. And while grabbing that, let's also grab the current date that the article was posted on. Again, this is inside of the post card, and we're going to paste it here. If we end up using it one more time, we can definitely make it into a component. Now let's see, we have to import moment in this file. So let's import it right here. Import moment from moment. There we go. And if we save that, we can now see JSM and then the date. Okay, this doesn't look the best, so let's try to remove the justify center from this div and save it. And now technically this looks like a mobile device. So having it on the left and on the right side is fine for mobile. On desktop, this of course looks much better. So let's stick with that. Now we have to go below this div, still inside of the major one right here. And inside of there, we can implement our title. That's going to be class name is equal to margin bottom 8. Then we can also say text 3XL and font semi-bold. That's simply going to say post.title. If we save that, we can now see React testing here. And finally, we have to render out the content. And rendering the content is going to be, let's call it interesting. So post.content.raw.children, and then we want to map over the children to get each specific type object. So the way we're going to get this data is going to be in a lot of different objects where we'll have to map through the children of that specific object. As a matter of fact, let me show you what I mean. I'm going to simply console log before doing anything. Let's do a console.log post.content.raw. Let's save the page and open up the inspect element, go to console, and there we go. Our object is right here with 4 different children. You can see that each child is an object containing the type, as in paragraph, and then the children, which is something a text, is it a bold text, and so on. And we have to render out each specific object. They're doing it like this because this is not always going to be text. It's going to be images, headings, tables, everything else you can think of. So we have to properly map over our children and find out what is that we are rendering. So we're getting a type object as well as the index. Finally, we want to map over that. Let's open it up as a normal function like this. And then inside of there, we want to get the children by saying children is equal to type object dot children, and we need to map over them one more time to get one item, and let's call the item index. Now, what do we want to do for each specific item? Well, we're going to call a special function. We can first call it here, get content fragment. So we need to decide of which type is this item. So we need to pass the item index as well as the item.text. And finally, we can pass the item itself. Of course, this function doesn't exist yet, but we're going to create it soon. And just below this children, finally, we can return something. And that return is going to be the call to the same function, get content fragment. But this time we're passing things from the upper object. So we need to pass the index. We also need to pass the children this time, because now we have it, the children of a specific item. Then we are going to get the type object itself. And finally, type object dot type. I know this is getting complicated, but this is maybe the hardest part where we need to properly loop over every single piece of content to figure out what type is it made of. So now we know that we have to create this function just above. And this is going to be a function that's not that hard to actually think about or create a logic for, but we have to type out a lot of details. So in this case, I'm simply going to paste it here, and you'll be able to find the entire code in the GitHub gist down below. But of course, I'm going to go through it and explain every single line. Make sure to copy it, and then you can continue with the video. What we have to do here is, of course, declare the function, accept parameters, and then create a new variable where we just save the text here into it so that we can change it. So we're looking into the object, if the object exists. If that's the case, and if the object.bold exists, then we simply want to return the modified text as bold, right? If it's italic, we want to return it as italic or underlined. Then we go into the type. So we have a switch where we're checking for the type of that object. It can be a heading 3, for example. So we're going to make it an H3 and return it. It can be a paragraph, a heading 4, or an image. Or it can be a normal text, in which case we're just going to return it. If we did this correctly, we should properly render out the entire piece of content right here. Now, let's see what do we have. Type object is not defined. So in here, we called it type object. Let's see if we're somewhere calling it type object like this. So in here, we're calling it type obj. In here, I see type object fully spelled. Let's see if we're calling that somewhere. There we go, type object here. This should have been just type obj. And as soon as we save that, we have our content. In my case, I have only text in there with a few bolded words and italicized words. But if you wanted to put any images, GIFs, or anything else that goes into blog articles, you can now do that with this specific functionality. Great. And with that, we're done with our post detail. The next thing we can focus on is going to be the author information. So we can go into the author information component and we can start implementing it. This one is of course going to be just a bit simpler. So to implement the author properly, we're going to get the author from props because we're already passing it. And right here, let's immediately render the author's image. That's going to be a self-closing tag. Something like, let's do alternative text is going to be set to author.name. We can also give it a height, which can be something like 100 pixels. And the width is also going to be 100 pixels. Then we're going to give it a class name, which is going to be set to align-middle and also rounded-full. And finally, the most important thing is going to be the source. That's going to be author.photo.url. Now, if we save that and scroll down, you can see the JavaScript Mastery logo appear right here. It's not yet in a full circle, but even if it were, it wouldn't look perfect because my logo has more width than it has height. So it's not gonna fit properly in a perfect circle. Now let's add our div. We're gonna have a class name set to text-center, as well as the margin top 20, also margin bottom 8, and let's do padding 12. It's going to be relative. It's going to be rounded-LG, and we're going to have a background BG black. Now, if you save that, you can see that looks quite aggressive, but we're going to also set the BG-opacity. This is a new thing, -20. So this is going to lower the opacity, and now it looks so much better. We're going to add one more div here. That div is going to have a class name equal to absolute, as well as the left-0, also right-0, and finally -top -14. That's going to be the div that the image is going to go inside of. There we go. Add the rest of the JSX. That's going to be the H3. It's going to have a class name set to text-white, margin top -4, margin bottom 4, like this. In that case, we could have used simply margin Y, set to 4, and then text-XL and font-bold. Inside of there, we can simply render the author's name by saying author.name. And there we go, JSM. Finally, we're going to render one last thing, which is going to be a paragraph. That paragraph is going to render the author.bio. Let's look at it. There we go. And let's add some classes. That's going to be class name is set to text-white and text-lg. Great. Okay, this design definitely doesn't look that good. So the first thing we can do is put this div above the h3 and the p. Only the image should be inside of that div. If we save that, that instantly looks just a bit better. In here, I should have had 0. That's going to center everything in the middle. And for the first time, we can also use the image tag from Next.js. We can say import image from, that's going to be next, and then image. Let me just quickly show you what that is about. It's basically an image component, the same as the basic one, but it supports static site generation with Next.js. So in this case, I'm going to switch it to that image, and basically everything else has to be the same, but we can in this case say unoptimized. That's going to be it, and we're going to save it. Now if we go back, it is going to be centered in the middle, but of course this still doesn't look that good. Let's see how does it look like on the deployed version. This is looking so much better. So I'm going to go ahead and change my logo to the white version in my GraphCMS dashboard. There we go. We are inside of our dashboard, and I'm going to go to content. Once we're here, we can go to authors and just simply change it. I pulled everything so we have more space, and I'm going to click replace photo, and I'm simply going to upload it. There we go. I'm going to choose a different version of the logo and simply click upload. Let's see, save and publish. And the changes should be reflected immediately if I reload the page. Okay, it says that the URL of our photo is null. That's because the photo itself still hasn't been published. So I'm going to publish it right here. There we go. Everything is published now, and we can reload the page. This looks so much better. So sometimes the code is going to be correct, but you have to use the right image. Great. With that said, our author portion is now done. We have our entire post details page with the author, the date of publishing, the title and the content, as well as the author information. We also have our related posts right here and the categories. What we can do next is going to be the comments form and the comments themselves. To create comments for the first time in this video, we won't be just pulling the data from GraphCMS. We'll be sending data. We need to write a comment that's then going to appear inside of our GraphCMS dashboard, and then we have to allow it. So let's go ahead and implement it right now. So let's go ahead and close all of the components besides the comments form. That's going to be our next comment to implement. Inside of here, we'll be dealing with some forms, of course. So let's import a few things from React, and that's going to be use state as well as the use effect. To our comments form, we are already sending in the slug, so we can get it right here. And let's go ahead and create a few use state fields. I usually create use states by starting to type use state and then clicking this little rectangle right here. And don't click anything yet. Just type the name of your state, something like error, and then press tab. It's immediately going to capitalize the E right here, and you can start typing your default state, which is going to be false in this case. Now we can repeat the process a few more times. The second state is going to be called local storage. This is going to allow us to simply fetch the data from local storage, and at the start, it's going to be set to null. The third state we'll be dealing with is going to be the use state, something like show success message. And at the start, that's also going to be set to false. And finally, for our form fields, we're simply going to use the use ref hook. So we can also import the use ref right here. And that's going to be const comment element is equal to use ref. We're also going to duplicate that 3 more times. The second one is going to be name element. The third one is going to be the email element. We can add the EL at the end right here and right here. And the last one is going to be the store data element like this. We don't need to keep these values in the state because we simply want to read the value from the input field and then send it to GraphCMS. That's where we're going to use refs because they're going to be more efficient than keeping track of the entire input state. With all of these states and refs right here, we can now start creating our output. So let's first add a class name to our first div, and that's going to be bg-white. And let's scroll down so that we can see the changes. There we go, comments form. Let's do shadow-lg, rounded-lg, and finally padding-8, padding bottom 12, and margin bottom 8. With that, we get this nice looking card. Then we're going to have an h3 instead of an h1, and we're going to give it a class name, which is going to be set to text-xl. Margin bottom is going to be set to 8. Font is going to be semi-bold like this. And also we're going to give it a border bottom as well as the padding bottom 4. Great, that's going to make it look like all of our other cards. Now we're going to create a div below this h3, and that div is going to be of a class name is grid. It's going to have grid-cols-1. Gap is going to be set to 4, and margin bottom is going to be set to 4. Now let's duplicate that div 2 more times. In the first one, we're going to have our text area. This is going to be the element in which we're going to input our actual comment. We can specify a ref, which is going to be the comment element like this. And finally, to make this look really good, we're going to add quite a long class name. So let's say class name is equal to padding-4 like this. Also, we're going to do outline-none. Let's do w-full. That's going to make it full width. We can also make it rounded-lg. And now let's specify what's going to happen once we focus it. So we can say focus ring-2. Then we can also say focus ring-gray-200. And then usually it's going to be bg-gray-100. There we go. Now you can see this little text area right here. And for the text, we can say text gray 700. Great. This is our comment. We're going to pull that into a new line. And our text area is going to be a self-closing tag. So we can do it like this. And let's put our class name in a new row because we have to add a few more things. Before that, we need to delete this right here, and we should be good to go. The other things we need to add are going to be the placeholder, which we can set to comment, and also name is going to be set to comment. Great. Now we can see that right here, and we can create an input for our name and our email. Our input is going to be inside of this div right here. We can create an input as a self-closing tag. It's going to have a type equal to text, ref equal to name element. And now for the classes, we can basically copy this entire object right here. The only thing we'll do, instead of padding 4, we're going to say py, and that's going to be 2. And of course, we can copy the placeholder and the name right here, but that's going to be name and also name right here. There we go. Now we have our comment and our name. We can just say padding x is going to be 4. There we go, to space it out properly. Now we can go ahead and duplicate this input. And right here, instead of name element, we're going to say that's going to be email element. Here we can say email, and right here the name is going to be email. There we go. We have our comment, name, and email. And for our second div right here that contains these inputs, we can simply say on large devices, LG, grid-calls-to. This is going to make the name and email go one next to each other, as you can see right here. Great. Now, we won't need this div, but instead of that div, we're going to specify the error if somebody types something wrong. So right here, we can say error. If the error exists, in that case, we want to render out a p tag that's going to say all fields are required. Not rounded, that's going to be required. Great. So, and let's give it a class name. Our class name is going to be text-xs and also text-red-500. Of course, we won't see the error right now, but later on, once we test the error handling, we will be able to see it. Now, below that error, we're going to add a div. This div is going to have a class name set to margin top empty 8. And right here, we're just going to have a button. This button is going to be of a type is equal to button. And we're going to have an onClick. OnClick is going to be equal to handle comment submission. Just like that. Of course, this function doesn't yet exist, so let's go ahead and create it right here. Const handle comment submission. And for now, we can leave it empty. Great. So what class names are we going to give to this button? I'm going to put this into multiple rows again so that we can see it properly. And let's start adding the class names. We can start by saying class name is equal to, and we're going to give it a transition. Then we're going to give it a duration of 500 milliseconds, and the animation is going to be ease. Let's also immediately say something inside of the button, something like post comment. That way we'll be able to see the changes that we're making on this button. There we go, post comment. Right now we don't have anything, but if we say hover, then we want to say BG, that's going to be indigo 900. And also it's going to be inline dash block. Let's see if that makes any changes. Not yet. I have an extra N here. There we go. So now you can see that transition. It eases into the indigo color. Then we're going to say BG dash pink dash 600. And we can say text dash LG to make it a bit larger. Also, let's do rounded dash full. And let's do text dash white. Okay, this is looking a bit better. And finally, we're going to give it a PX or a horizontal padding set to 8. And also PY is going to be set to 3. And finally, cursor dash pointer. Take a look. Now it eases in from this pink color into this indigo color. Great. I know a lot of classes to just create a button, but we do have a completely custom button with the animation right now in one line. And right now next to that button, we can show our submission message. So right here below the button, we can say if show success message, and N, in that case, we want to render a span. And that span is going to say comment submitted for review. Great. And let's give it some class names. That's going to be, let's do text XL, extra large. Let's make it float right, font dash semi bold, margin top is going to be 3, and let's do text green 500. Of course, we cannot see that yet, but once we actually submit this, then you'll be able to see that message. Of course, now we have to work with actual data that we'll be sending over. So we have to go to handle comment submission. Inside of here, the first thing we're going to do is set the error to be false, because at the start, we don't have errors. And then we have to check if the error exists. So we can say if no comment element dot current dot value, or no, that's going to be name element dot current dot value, or no, that's going to be email element without the dot at the start, no email element dot current dot value. You can see we are repeating these things quite often. So what we can say is let's do simply comment by destructuring the value. So const comment is equal to, that's going to be comment element dot current. And finally, we can duplicate this 2 more times. The second time, we're going to get the name from the name element dot current. And the third time, we're going to get the email from the email element. That's going to be email element, like this. Of course, we need to get the actual value from the current, so this syntax wouldn't be correct. We need to say destructure the value and then rename it to comment. And we can repeat the same thing in this case. And now we'll be able to simply write something like if no comment, and then we can say here, or no name, or no email. In that case, what do we want to do? Well, simply set the error to be equal to true and then return to outside of this function because we want to stop the comment submission. Great. Now we want to form the actual comment object. We can do that by saying const comment obj is equal to, and in here we can simply say name, email, and comment. And finally, we need to pass the slug as well. Now, even though this is an object, we don't need to say name is equal to name, email is equal to email, and so on. And that's the exact reason why we destructure this, because now we can use this shorthand property and just have everything in one line. Finally, now we have to check if the user wants us to save the data into local storage. To check that, we're simply going to add a checkbox. And before we do that, we're just going to copy this div right here and paste it just above our error here. There we go. So that's going to be a grid columns 1, gap 4, and margin bottom 4. Inside of there, we can create one more div, which is going to be just a container. And in here, we can have an input tag, which is a self-closing tag. It's going to have a ref equal to store data.element. The type is going to be equal to checkbox. The ID is going to be set to store data. The name is going to be set to store data as well. And finally, the value is going to be set to true by default. In this case, this should have been just store data element. So that's going to fix it. There we go. There's our checkbox. And now let's add a label for that checkbox. We can do that by saying label. In there, we can say something like save my email and name for the next time I comment. There we go. And now let's just style it with Tailwind by saying class name. That's going to be equal to text-gray-500 and cursor-pointer. And finally, we're just going to say HTML4 store data. Now, if we save that, you can see if we click this, it actually triggers this checkbox. We can just add some margin left right here by saying margin left, ML, and let's do 2. If we scroll down, you'll notice that now it has some margin left. Great. So now we can use that value from store data element. We can also destructure that right here inside of our handle comment submission by simply saying store data element, and here we're going to say store data. So do we want to store data or not? But in this case, this is not going to be value. It's going to be the checked state because it's a checkbox. So now just below this comment object, we can say if that's going to be store data. So if the user wants us to store the data, in that case, we can simply say local storage dot set item. We want to set the name to be equal to, and we can simply put name here because we destructured it from our ref. And finally, we can duplicate this line, and in here we can use email. Now, if that is not the case, if we don't want to store the data, in that case, we can simply remove it from the local storage by not using set item here. Rather, it's going to be remove item. Great. So now we handle the local storage as well. And finally, we have to submit our comment. We can do that by adding a new query to our services right here. So let's scroll to the bottom. And right here, we can create one more function. That's going to be export const. Let's call it submit comment. That's going to be an async function, and we're going to accept the actual comment object. Now, in this case, we won't be making a basic GraphQL query. We are rather going to make an HTTP request to our own Next.js backend. So remember when I said that you can create your own API inside of a Next.js application, you don't need to have a separate Node.js server? Well, that's exactly what we'll be doing. We're going to write a request that's going to go straight to our own backend. So that's going to look something like this. Const result is equal to await fetch. We want to make a fetch request to /API/comments, and then we want to pass some data. So we can say the method is going to be set to post. Then we're going to add the headers. And finally, we're going to set the body to be equal to json.stringify, and that's going to be object. So we're going to send a stringified object to our own backend. Finally, once we return the data, we want to return result.json. There we go. Of course, now the most important part is to create our own backend endpoint, which is going to accept that comment and actually do something with it. And the reason why we need a backend is because GraphCMS allows our own backend to interact with our service to actually submit a comment to GraphCMS. Then we'll be able to see it and approve or disapprove it from the GraphCMS dashboard. So we can go to our API and we already have a hello.js file. If you want to read more about the API routes that Next.js offers, you can go to this link. But in this case, we're going to rename our hello.js to something like, let's do comments.js. Now I'm going to put my own comment right into here, and it's going to say something like this. Any file inside of the folder pages API is mapped to /API/something and will be treated as an endpoint instead of a page. This is really important to know. As I've told you, you can create your own backend within a Next.js application. So this file is going to be an endpoint to /API/comments. And if we go here, you can see that that's exactly what we are doing. So let's create that endpoint. We can first import the things that we need. That's going to be import. Let's do GraphQL like this, GraphQL. And what we need from GraphQL is going to be GraphQL client. And we also need GQL to make that query. Now we're going to say const, and that's going to be GraphQL API. This is the variable that we already saved inside of the process.env.next_public_, I think it's GraphCMS_endpoint. We can also go ahead and take a look right inside of here. That's right, next public GraphCMS. And I'm going to expand our editor so it's easier to work here. And let's go ahead and create our endpoint. So we can say export default function. Let's call it comments. We accept the request and the response, the same as we do in Node. If you haven't worked with Node before, don't worry. This is not a backend tutorial. I'm just going to show you how to create this one route so that we can submit user comments. Now, to be able to post data to our GraphCMS, we need to set up the GraphQL client. So we can say const, that's going to be GraphQL and client like this. Usually we can write graph and then QL is going to be uppercase. GraphQL client like so. And that's going to be equal to new GraphQL client. As the first parameter, we need to pass our GraphQL API right here. And then as the second parameter, we're going to pass the options object where we're going to set the authentication headers. So our headers are going to say authorization, not authentication, my bad. And we need to set that to a template string that's going to say bearer. And in here, we have to use something from the process.env. And this is going to be a specific token that we don't already have access to. So let's find that special GraphCMS token from inside of their dashboard. I'm going to expand our Chrome right now, and we are right here. So let's go to settings. I'm going to expand it even more so that we can see the sidebar. And let's go to permanent auth tokens. If we scroll a bit more down, we can create our first permanent auth token. Let's add a token name as dev, and we don't need to add a description. Create and configure permissions. And there we go. We have our token right here, and I'm simply going to copy it. Now we can go back to our code, more specifically to the .env file. Inside of here, we're going to set GraphCMS underscore token is going to be equal to like this, and we're just going to put it in strings. There we go. This is our token. Of course, you can copy yours. Once we have that, we can go back here and just say process.env .graphcms underscore token. And this is how we're going to authenticate or authorize our GraphQL client. Now that we have our GraphQL client, we can create our query. And we wrote a lot of queries so far, so you know how it goes. Const query is equal to GQL, template string, and then from inside of here, we write our query. But for the first time ever, this query is going to be a mutation query, not just a regular get query. So in here, we can say mutation, and we can call it create comment. And when I say mutation in GraphQL, that simply means that we're going to update some data or add some new data, like a new comment. So our create comment in GraphQL is going to accept a few parameters. It's going to be name. We need to put a $sign syntax inside of GQL queries. And that's going to be colon, string, exclamation mark. And then we can do the same thing. $sign email is again going to be a string like this. Then we're going to add our actual comment, which is going to be again one more string like this. And finally, we need a slug, and our slug is going to be a string as well. Finally, open up a pair of curly braces. Inside of there, we're going to call that create comment, and we need to pass the data. So we can say data colon, and then we can say name is equal to $sign name, email is equal to $sign email, comment like this is equal to $sign comment, and then finally post is equal to. Now keep in mind, I'm going to put this a bit more to the right. We have to say connect colon an object slug is equal to $sign slug. So we're connecting our comment and name and email to a specific post that the user commented on. And finally, after all of these parentheses and curly braces, we're going to add the ID right here. Once we run this query, it's going to create a new comment inside of the GraphCMS dashboard. So let's run it. We can run it by saying const result is equal to await. That's going to be GraphQL client, and then .request. We need to pass in our query, and then as the second parameter, we need to pass our object, which contains all of our data. Things like name. Our name is going to be equal to rec.body.name. Then we're also going to have our email, our comment, and our slug. And we can destructure that at the top by saying name, email, slug, and comment is equal to rec.body. Now, instead of writing everything like this, name is equal to rec.body.name, email is equal to rec.body.email, and so on, we can simply write it like this: name, and then email. But if you think about it, the only thing that our rec.body contains are these exact properties: name, email, slug, and comment. So if you think about it, we're trying to form an object by taking the properties outside of another object and then putting them back in. So that's not necessary. We don't need to create a new object. We can just pass the entire rec.body because it already contains all the values that we need. And finally, once we get the result, we can return it back to our frontend Next.js by saying res.status is 200 .send result. And there we go. If we've done everything correctly, our endpoint should now work and we should be ready to import it inside of our comments form. Right inside of here, we can simply import, that's going to be submit comment from / services. And right here below our if store data, we can call our submit comment. Of course, we're going to call it and pass in the comment object, comment obj, and then let's use the .then syntax. So we're going to have a .then here. Inside of the .then, we're going to get the response from our backend. Inside of .then, we can simply say set show success message to be set to true. And finally, we're going to add a timeout. So something like set timeout like this. And in there, we can simply say set show success message to be equal to false after, let's do 3000 milliseconds, which is 3 seconds. So we'll be showing that message for 3 seconds and then remove it. And that's going to be it for our submit comment. Now, if you think about it, there's just one more thing to do. And that is, if we're visiting the post for the second time, our local storage data is already going to be there. So we need to make use of it. For that, let's create a new use effect. It's going to be a component did mount use effect. So it's only going to happen at the start. And inside of here, we can simply say name element dot current dot value is equal to window dot local storage dot get item like this, and that's going to be name. Finally, we can duplicate this. That's going to be email element, and we can write here get the email. Let's save it and see if everything works. Back in our application, localhost 3000, there is our beautiful comments form. I think that we shouldn't actually say comments form there. Rather, let's say something like leave a reply. So let's go here and say leave a reply. And let's try to actually leave a reply. This post is about React testing. So I'm going to say Jest or Mocha. These are React testing libraries. I've added my name and my email, and I'm going to click save my email and name for the next time I comment. Finally, let's go ahead and click post comment. I would actually be surprised if everything worked the first try. Usually, once you write code for quite a lot of time and don't do any testing, something breaks, but that's completely normal. So let's go ahead and click post comment. Let's see. There we go, there's our error. Looks like we cannot read property of null reading set item in the if store data. So in React, you can immediately use the local storage, but in Next.js, it might be possible that we need to add window.local storage right here. So let's try to save it and test it out. I've added my name and email one more time, and I'm gonna click post comment. This time we got a different error, unexpected reserved word await. That is going to be inside of line 23, comments.js. So let's go to our comments.js, line 23, and we have an await here, but I don't think we have an async. So let's say async function comments. Now we should be able to use await. And as you can see, our local storage now worked, and third time is the charm. So let's say Jest or Mocha. Let's do all uppercase right now. And let's go ahead and post our comment. Okay, nothing seems to be happening, which could be a good thing or a bad thing. So let's go to inspect and let's check out our console log. We have 4 different errors here. Let's try to clear them and click post comment one more time. There we go. Internal server error, localhost 3000 API comments 500. Unexpected token in JSON at position 0. So let's try to open up this request and go here. We got a 500, which means that something went wrong on our API side. And again, I don't want to simply fix this and skip it in the video. I want to lead you through the process of debugging this error yourself, because errors are a normal thing and they happen to everyone. So let's go to our backend side and see what can we do here. First thing we can do to try to debug this is add a try and catch block. If we're using an await, we can put it in a try block, also return the result in the try. But if something goes wrong, we want to console log this error. So let's try to see what do we get. Now I'll try to initiate one more request. Right here, we're not expecting anything on our front-end side because now we're working with the backend. So you can go back to your code, go to view and then terminal, and right inside of here, we should be able to see our error if you scroll down. There we go. Type error, GraphQL something, GraphQL client is not a constructor. That means that it's complaining that we're trying to do a new on GraphQL client. And I've just noticed the issue. We're not trying to import this from GraphQL. Rather, it's going to be a GraphQL request library. There we go. Now our GraphQL client should be good and we should be able to make a comment. Now let's clear our console and click post comment. And nothing seems to happen. If we go to our network tab, we can see that all of our requests are pending. That means that we're still getting into the error. So let's see what the error is this time. And it looks like API resolved without sending a response for API comments. Let's try to read it a bit more. GraphQL error, there we go. So this is the real error. And the error message is saying parse token failed. Compact JWS format must have 3 parts. So let's see if we mess something up with the actual authorization part. What I would do right now is save this into a new variable, GraphCMS token. Let's add a capital T, and that's going to be equal to process.env.graphcms token. Of course, we can now use that token right inside of here, but I also want to add a console log at the top right here, console.log. That's going to be GraphCMS token. Let's see if we get anything back. I'm also going to wrap it in an object so that we can more easily see where is it. I'm going to save it and make one more request. There we go, still pending. If we open up our terminal and scroll down, we see compiled successfully, but let me try to make one new request, post comment, and looks like nothing is happening yet. So let's simply also return something because all the errors are currently pending. So right here, I'm going to say return res.status 500, and we can pass over the error. There we go. Now I'm going to reload the page. And these errors shouldn't be pending anymore because now we're returning something from the backend, even though we have an error. So right here, I'm going to post my comment, mocha or jest, and finally post comment. There we go. Now you can see that we immediately get a 500. And in here, we have the request and the response. Parse token still failed. But now if we go back and scroll a bit up, we can indeed see that our GraphCMS token is undefined. So that means one out of 2 things. First, we either named it incorrectly. Let's see, GraphCMS. Nope, the name is correct. And the second thing is we forgot to reload our server before we tested out the token. Remember, whenever you change the .env, you have to restart your server. Okay, that was definitely a rookie mistake, but again, that's the whole point of why I left this entire part in. To tell you that rookie mistakes are happening to everybody, and you can spend hours and hours looking at a thing that should have been obvious. But again, you saw how I went through the entire debugging process, and there we go. Now it should work. And usually, it's always a good idea to have a try and catch block in case something goes wrong. So now finally, I'm going to say mocha or jest. And now we're really angry and hopefully it's going to work now. Let's click post comment. And there we go. It says comment submitted for review, but we did get a 500 again. And the error is JSON body could not be decoded. So let's see what we're passing in as JSON. Let's see. From our frontend part, we're passing in the JSON right here as the comment object. Then we go into our submit comment right here, and we're passing in a stringified object. It's possible that we also have to add headers right here and specify the actual content type. So right here, I'm going to say content in a string, content dash type, and that's going to be set to a string that's going to say application / JSON. Let's try to save that and see if it's going to work right now. I'm going to press post comment one more time. We still do get a 500, but now it's a different error saying field post is not defined by comment create input. Okay, so we can go back to the code, and now the error is definitely happening right here. Most likely has to do something about this post right here. It's saying the field post doesn't exist on a comment. Let's go to our GraphCMS dashboard and see if we do have a post connected to our comment. So that's going to be GraphCMS, schema, comment, and looks like there isn't anything here. We definitely have to create a reference between a comment and a post. So let's go to our post, and right inside of here, I'm going to create a new reference. That reference is going to be to the comment, and it's going to be a two-way reference. Multiple posts per comment, that's not going to be true. It's going to be multiple comments per post. And then it's going to be read and write here as well. And there we go. It has been created. And if we go to our comment now, you can see that there is a post. So hopefully our mutation query should accept our post as a parameter to our create comment. Now that we've actually connected our comment to our post, we can go to settings, and then we're going to go to permanent auth tokens, finally edit, and then create permission. We want to give read, create, update, delete, publish, and unpublish, and anything. We can give all permissions to our API token because that's our token. So let's click create. Of course, if you use real tokens, you can only give the permissions that you want. In this case, we're gonna need only the create, update, and potentially read. But now let's go ahead and go back to our application, and let's try to post our comment. We can of course first clear the console. And there we go, 200 comment submitted for review, and we got the ID of the comment. Now the comment is not going to immediately appear right here, but if we go to GraphCMS and if we go to our content, comment, you'll see that a new comment appeared right here, created by dev token, and it's set as a draft. That's because we don't want to allow all comments on our blogs. Some comments may be inappropriate, so we want to choose which ones do we allow. And there we go. We've actually submitted this data from our front end to our GraphCMS, and now we can publish it. Our comment has been published, and right now there isn't really a way for us to know if it's there. What we need to do next is implement the comments function, where we're just going to read the comments for each specific blog and then show them right here. So let's do that right now. To actually show our posts, we can close all of the files besides the comments.jsx file. Inside of here, we can start by first importing a few things. That's going to be use state as well as the use effect from React. Then we're also going to import moment. That's going to be moment from moment. And finally, we're going to import parse from HTML-React-parser. Inside of our comments, we're getting a slug as our prop. We're passing it in, so we're accepting it. And now we have to get all of the comments for this specific post. To do that, first, we can create a new use state field. And let's call our state comments, set comments, and at the start, they're going to be set to an empty array. Then we can create a new use effect right here. And our use effect is going to be a did mount, meaning it's only going to happen at the start. And what do we want to do at the start? Well, we want to call the get comments function, and we need to pass in our slug. Of course, this get comments function is not defined yet, so let's go to our services and then our index.js, and let's create that last GraphQL query to fetch the comments. It's going to be a simple one. We can even copy this get categories, paste it right here, and just rename it to get comments. query is going to be similar. Const query is equal to GQL, a template string. And then right here, that's going to be get comments. But we're going to call it as a function and say slug is equal to string with an exclamation mark. So we're going to accept one parameter, and that parameter is going to be slug coming from here. And to be able to retrieve it inside our GraphQL query, we need to pass it right here as the third parameter to our GraphQL request. So once we have the query, we want to simply fetch all the comments where post slug is $slug. So one more time, we're trying to get all of the comments where in an object post, again in an object, has this slug. Once we do get all of them, we can simply fetch them, and then we want to fetch the name, also the created at property, and finally we want to return result.comments. Great. Our last query is done, and now we can go back here and import it. That's going to be import get comments, and that's coming from /services right inside of here. Okay, now that we do have this function, we can call a .then on it like this. Once we call a .then, we're going to get a result, and we simply want to do set comments result, because that result is actually the new updated comments. Therefore, we're now setting our comments, and we can go ahead and display them right here. So to do that, we can first create a new empty React fragment right here. And inside of there, we can check if our comments exist by saying comment.length is greater than 0. In that case, we want to display the following. We want to display a div. That div is going to have a class name equal to bg-white, shadow-lg, rounded-lg, padding-8, padding bottom-12, and margin bottom-8. Finally, inside of there, we're going to have our comment, so we can say h3. That h3 is going to have a class name set to text-xl, margin bottom 8, font-semi-bold, border-b, and finally padding bottom is 4. Inside of here, we're simply going to list the number of comments by saying comments.length, and then we can leave one empty space like this, and we're simply going to say comments. So this is going to be like 2 comments or 3 or 4 or any number of comments. And finally, below that h3, we want to actually map over the comments. We can do that like this, comments.map. We get an individual comment, and we simply want to display something for it. That's going to be a div with a key equal to, let's do comment.created at, because every comment should be created at a different time. That div is going to have a class name equal to border-b, border-gray-100, margin bottom 4, and padding bottom 4. Finally, inside of that div, we're going to have a paragraph. That paragraph is going to have a class name equal to margin bottom 4. And we're going to have a span element right here. That span is simply going to show the comment.name, meaning the person who created that comment. And it's going to have a class name equal to font-semi-bold. And below that, we can leave one more space and say on. I don't want to say on click, I simply want to say on, and then we're going to leave one more space. And right here, we are going to use the moment library to say comment.created at, and then .format to get the month, and then dd, and then comma 4 times y. There we go. This is going to give us our date, and this is going to be it for our comments. And finally, the most important thing, right below this paragraph, we're going to have one more paragraph with a class name equal to white space dash pre dash line. Again, feel free to search for this in Tailwind docs. Then text dash gray dash 600. And finally, w dash full for full width. Inside of there, we're going to call the parse function from our library and then send the comment.comment. And this is going to be it. We're going to loop through the comments and display them with this functionality and this JSX. Let's save it and take a look. And there we go. One comment from Adrian on October 21st, 2021, mocha or jest. Let's leave one more comment. I'm going to say, whoa, the comments actually work. And let's go ahead and post it. Comment submitted for review. That's great. We can go to our GraphCMS dashboard, and right inside of here, we can go to comments, and there is our draft comment. We can look into it, publish it, and just like that, if we go back and reload the page, we can see that now we have two different comments. And finally, there's just one more thing left to do, and that's the thing that I left as a challenge for today's video. You learn a lot by watching these videos because you're exposed to these new technologies and new ways of thinking, but you really learn the most once you try something out yourself. So the challenge for this video is to code out the featured posts section. Of course, I'm not just going to leave you here. I'm going to give you access to the code and walk you quickly through it. So once you actually code it out, or if you get stuck, you can reference to this specific part of the video. But definitely make sure to give it a try yourself. With that said, I'm going to show you how to get access to the code right now. You can start by creating a new file, but it's not going to be inside of the components. It's going to be inside of a new folder called sections. Inside of there, we're going to create a file called featured posts.jsx. The code is going to be in the gist down below alongside all of the other files we've used so far. So you can simply paste it here, or you can reference to this code if you tried coding it out yourself. So essentially what we're doing is we're fetching data from GraphQL and just rendering it in a carousel. You can notice that there is one more component that we need, which is a featured post card. So inside of the components, let's create that featured post card.jsx. And this file is also not that complicated. It's mainly doing everything we've done so far, passing in the post through props, and then right here, displaying some JSX using Tailwind and displaying the image for that specific post. Now, the key part is that we also have to make one more and last GraphQL query. Right here, get featured posts. So to do that, you can go to services, index.js, and just at the bottom, you can either copy it or you can code it yourself. You can try going through some other queries and thinking about how this query would look like. Of course, we're getting posts, but were we getting the posts somewhere else? Like here, this is the post details. In here, we're getting all of the posts. So could that be related? This is how the get featured posts query is going to look like. It's a query where we get a post, and the only thing we had to do is say get the posts where the Boolean value featured post is set to true, and then pull out all of these details that we need for that specific post, and then finally return it. Now that we have that query, we have our featured post card, and we're actually looping over all of our featured post cards. Let's go ahead and check it out. Let's go to localhost 3000 and reload the page. Right now, we cannot see anything because we haven't yet rendered it out on our homepage. So inside of the index.js, not the one in the components, but the main one inside of the pages, index.js, inside of here, we have to import. That's going to be featured posts like this, and that's coming from /sections. And we can render it just below the head element. There we go. Of course, that's going to be a self-closing component. There we go. Let's save it. And before we go ahead and check it out, let's just export this component by adding a new file in the sections index.js. And inside of here, we're simply going to say export default as, that's going to be featured posts from /featured posts, just like that. Now, before we finally go ahead and take a look, let's just go to our components in the JS, and let's not forget to export our featured post card as well. So right here, that's going to be featured post card. There we go. Now we're finally ready to take a look. And there we go. As soon as I reloaded the page, we can see our featured posts right here. That's looking great. If we had more, we would even have a carousel and we would be able to switch between them. Right now, this is looking a bit empty, but with the power of GraphCMS, your clients or yourself can simply add new posts right away. And in a matter of minutes, you can fill your blog with a lot of posts. With that said, we've implemented the entire functionality of this application. Finally, we are ready to deploy it to the web. And since this is a Next.js application, we're going to use Vercel. Vercel works wonderfully with Next.js because they're both created by the same company. Before we go ahead and deploy this project, there are two more things that we have to implement. The first one is the category page. So right now, once we click on React, we're going to get a 404. And this is going to be the page similar to the one we've already created. So let me show you how to do it. We can go inside of the pages, and then right inside of here, we're going to create a new folder called category. Inside of our category, we're going to create a new file and also call it a slug.js, like this. There we go. And again, this is going to be really similar. So feel free to find the slug category file in the description down below. It's going to be in another gist. So there we go. I pasted it right here. And you can notice that we also need one more component, and that component is going to be a loader. So let's go to components. Let's add that loader.jsx. And that loader is going to be nothing more than a simple SVG that's going to say loading. Then inside of the index.js, we can of course export that loader straight inside of here. Considering that we've added some new changes to make sure that everything absolutely works and you don't encounter absolutely any errors, go to services and then simply paste the services page from the gist below this video. That way, we'll be sure that we're all on the same page and we'll be sure that your project is going to be deployed correctly. There we go. Now we can go back in here. And the final change that we have to make is going to be inside of our pages, post, and then slug right here. Right now, we just have get static props, but we set fallback to be false. That means that Next.js is going to statically generate our site. And that's going to be great. It's going to be incredibly fast. But if we deploy this project right now, and if we then add a new blog post using GraphCMS, we won't be able to get to it because all of our current posts are going to be statically generated. So what we have to do is simply set this fallback to be equal to true, and then we have to add a loader at the top. So right here, we can import something called use router from next router. We can also import one more component, which is going to be a loader component. And now finally, we can simply say const router is equal to use router. And then just below, we can say if router.is fallback. In that case, we want to return just a self-closing loader component. With that, we should be able to see all of the new articles that we post even after the deployment. Great. So with that said, we should be ready to actually publish this project. So let's go ahead and close all of the files and folders. And the first thing we have to do is create a new GitHub repository. To create a new GitHub repository, you can go to your GitHub and then at the top right, you can click new repository. Let's name it something like GraphCMS _ blog. That's going to be enough. Of course, you can call it anything you want. and then you can click Create Repository. And now we simply have to follow the steps to actually publish it. So I'm going to put this side by side with our editor. There we go. We can go to View, Terminal, and now we can stop that terminal from running by pressing Ctrl+C, Y, and then clear. Great. So let's start with git init. In here, it should say initialized or reinitialized. That's going to be fine. Then we want to add the .env to git ignore. So right here, just below, I'm going to add the .env file because we don't want to push it to GitHub. Then we're going to say git add dot, and now we can copy the rest of the steps. Git commit -m first commit, git branch -m main, git remote add origin like this, and finally git push u origin master. And as soon as you do that and reload the page, you should be able to see your GitHub repository appear right here. Once you do that, you can open up vercel.com and then go to the top right and click login. You can choose your preferred login method. I'm going to go with GitHub. And once you're in, you can simply click New Project. It's going to immediately recognize your GitHub repository, so you can click Import. We don't need a theme, so I'm going to click Skip. And just below, we can configure our project by adding our environment variables. So inside of our code, we can go to the .env, copy the name of the first env, paste it here, and then also, of course, copy the value. There we go, and click Add. Now we can repeat the process for the second environment variable right here. I'm going to take the value as well and paste it straight here. And finally, click Deploy. This process should take about a minute, and then we'll be right back to hopefully see our page live and deployed. And there we go. Confetti flew down the page and our project has been deployed. So let's go ahead and click right here and let's visit the page. And as you can see, our website is now live on the web. Now we can go back to GraphCMS and we can continue adding new articles to this deployed blog without knowing how to code at all. You can give access to this blog to anybody and they can simply go here to content and start creating new posts. This is phenomenal if you're creating any kind of websites for clients that need constant updates. This way they can add the updates themselves. So let's go to create item and let's add one final article. Let's do something like GraphCMS is awesome. Let's just say GraphCMS for the slug. For excerpt, let's do you must read this article. And then in here, we can really do anything you want. I'm just going to say bold, italic, testing, great. Again, just so we can test out different features, but really you can do anything you want in this case. You can even add links, change it to headings, and so on. Great. Let's add a featured image. In this case, I'm going to use this GraphCMS one. Let's make it a featured post. The author can be JavaScript mastery, and categories can be both React and web development. Finally, let's click Save and Publish. There we go, our article has been added. We can go back to our blog, reload the page, and a new article appeared momentarily. There we go. So let's go ahead and check it out. There we go. Our article is right here. We can add the content, we can see who created it, and everything is right here. Let's check out some more articles right here. And everything seems to be great. We can even see the comments. Of course, you can even add new authors, new categories, and new posts, everything through GraphCMS. And congratulations for coming to the end of this video. Hopefully everything looks great for you as well, and you'll be able to use this project for all of your future clients that need blog or any kind of website that needs content that requires updating. This is a big project, so it's possible that you'll encounter some edge cases or really obscure errors. If that's the case, I'll try to keep the GitHub repository up to date with all the latest fixes. So if something doesn't work, it's possible that the fix is going to be included in the GitHub repository of this project. So if something is just a bit different from what you've seen in the video, don't worry, on GitHub, we've implemented the latest fixes. With that said, thank you so much for watching, and one more time, huge thanks to GraphCMS for creating such an amazing CMS platform. I hope you enjoyed this video, learned a lot, and I'll see you in the next one. Have a wonderful day.